Are you searching for the best in online black radio? Then go to blacktalkradionetwork.com, helping you filter through the noise. Real talk, black talk.
The internet is full of half-truths and all-out lies. We've all seen them, and many people on social media complaining about it. Here's your chance to show and prove. WorldAfropedia.com is a black-owned and operated encyclopedia. There are several thousand articles, but we need help. We can't uncover all the truth ourselves. So please, join us and become a writer, editor, or blogger for WorldAfropedia.com today. Every little bit counts. We owe it to the future generations to put the truth out there. Visit WorldAfropedia.com, the African-centered encyclopedia, a global database of African knowledge for the purpose of bringing about global African wisdom and understanding. WorldAfropedia.com.
Welcome to the HBR IdeaCast from Harvard Business Review. I'm Sarah Green Carmichael. For the last 10 years, it's been my job as host of this podcast to ask questions. When I started, I got a simple piece of advice that I've always tried to come back to. Ask what you think the listener would want to know. But there's a lot more that goes into asking good questions than just that. So I'm excited to sit down today with two people who are expert question askers. Our guests are Leslie John and Allison Wood-Brooks, both faculty at Harvard Business School. They're the co-authors of the HBR article, The Surprising Power of Questions. They're here to talk about how to ask questions at work, ones that will help your conversations become more productive and help you bond with your team. Leslie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And Allison, thank you for coming back.
I am so happy to be back.
So let's just start by talking about what's the benefit to asking good questions in business.
Actually, the better question might be, what isn't the benefit of asking questions in business? Because the benefits are so abundant. Let me start simply by saying that most people do not ask enough questions, and they're missing out on many, many benefits, including that asking questions opens up the door for the exchange of information. When I ask you questions, you're gonna answer most likely, and I'm gonna learn what's in your mind. So that's information exchange. It's very valuable. In addition to information exchange, we know that asking questions increases interpersonal liking. Because I'm showing that I'm interested in learning and what's in your mind, I seem very responsive to you and empathic, and I'm taking your perspective, and I care about you, and that's likable. We also know that asking questions increases persuasion. Again, because I'm taking your perspective. Instead of trying to sell, I'm learning what you need, and then I can deliver that to you.
Lots of benefits.
But one of the, I think, really fascinating insights of Allison's research on this topic is that people don't appreciate this. So it's not obvious to us. We really underestimate the value and the power of questions.
Yeah. People in conversations are aware of how many questions they've asked and how many questions other people have asked, but they don't intuit the link between question asking and liking, persuasion, and information exchange. It's just not obvious, which is part of the reason that we probably don't ask enough questions. We don't understand the abundant benefits that await us.
So what are some of the questions you guys have found that are really effective?
So in situations where someone may be tempted to lie to you, if you ask a question that presupposes the thing that they don't want to tell you to be true, that's a more effective strategy to getting them to tell you the truth than a question that does the opposite. So an example would be, this is really simple. Imagine you're talking to a supplier and you're wondering whether the supplier is going to deliver on time. So the sensitive piece of information that the supplier may be reticent to divulge is that, no, we're not going to be on time. So you could ask them, you could say, you're going to be on time, right? That is kind of an optimistic assumption. Or you could say, I'm guessing you might be kind of late, right? And that would be a pessimistic assumption. So it's easier for the supplier to tell the truth when you ask it in a pessimistic way, because they just have to kind of confirm something. Whereas if you ask them in the optimistic way, it's harder for the supplier to admit to that thing.
Right.
So
they have to contradict you. They'd have to be like, actually, we're going to be late.
The basic point is that you want to make it easy for the other party in these competitive situations. You want to make it easy for them to tell you the thing that's hard for them to tell you. And so you can think about how you structure your questions in a way so that it helps them to disclose, essentially.
Mm-hmm. What about sort of differences between open-ended questions versus closed questions? Because usually in my job as an interviewer, I try to ask lots of open-ended questions. But are there situations where those are not as effective as a sort of tighter closed question?
Yeah. So it depends on your goals. And I think if you're interviewing somebody or you're trying to brainstorm or figure out what their interests are, asking open-ended questions, the way they answer those questions will be indicative of what's on their minds, right? You're giving them a long leash to decide, like, how am I going to answer this? Now, if you shift to a more competitive conversation where people will be guarded about the information they have, then pointed questions can be very effective at trying to suss out the truth. It's very hard to lie explicitly to someone's face when I say, okay, you're selling me this used iPod. Has it been damaged in the past? It's so much harder to say no right to my face with a yes/no question than if I say, tell me about the history of this iPod. Then you can lie by omission quite easily. Another type of question that I want to make the case for that's so magical and powerful is the follow-up question. So here we're talking about very specific examples and scenarios where certain types of questions will be good. Follow-up questions are almost always good, okay? They show that you're listening to what the person has already said, you're probing for more information, which shows that you listened, you care, and you want to know more, which is like the whole embodiment of empathy and perspective taking. So you seem like a very caring person, and you're smart because you're going to learn more information. It's like all of the good things wrapped up into one question asking strategy.
So why is the follow-up question? I will try to ask a follow-up question about
Good job.
question.
You're doing great.
Why are follow-up questions so much more powerful than other kinds of questions?
So questions that are not follow-up questions, we would classify, they're either an introductory question, so like, hi, how are you? Or rhetorical questions that don't even really demand a response. But most of the time, questions that are not follow-up questions are topic switching questions. So I might say things like, where are you from? Listen, 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 listen. Do you like the band U2? Listen, 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 listen. So it feels like you're working your way down a list of topics, which is okay, but it would be much more engaging and interesting to say, where are you from? Oh, I've been to Tuscaloosa. Do you live in this neighborhood? I had a friend who was from there. Where did you grow up? What were your parents like? What did your house look like? What do you regret about growing up there? All kinds of follow-up questions that make it really engaging. Almost all of our effects of question asking are explained by the power of follow-up questions.
It sounds like a lot of this advice is sort of context dependent. So if you have an adversarial relationship or you think that the person might lie to you, you need to take a different approach. What if you're not exactly sure where you stand with someone, that maybe you work together, but not always very well, and you're not sure if this person is a friend or an enemy or like a frenemy?
You sound like you're talking from experience, Sarah. I'm starting to get nervous.
I think we've all had relationships, especially at work, where we're not exactly sure where we stand.
No, I think we've almost constructed this false dichotomy where we've presumed that everyone knows you're in a cooperative conversation or a competitive one.
And that each is one or the other.
Right. And in fact, most conversations are mixed goals. You have a cooperative goal to have fun and enjoy your interactions with others. Usually there's some sort of conflict goal, even among managers and their direct reports, if you have to give feedback, constructive feedback, if you have to evaluate performance, if you have to negotiate a salary. And oftentimes you don't really know what is the mix of cooperative and competitive goals in this interaction that we're in right now. So your question is a good one. How do we navigate this? I will argue that in almost every scenario, whether it's cooperative or competitive, asking questions doesn't hurt. It hurts a lot less than people think. So we're very reticent to ask questions because we're afraid that we're going to ask something that's rude or incompetent or inappropriate. And in our results and our findings, we find that there are very few questions that people perceive as rude, incompetent, or inappropriate. And then especially follow-up questions. So just start somewhere, listen to their answer, and then follow up. And that will work in almost any situation.
When is it better to ask the tough question first versus sort of warming someone up to it and then building up to the moment where you ask what you really want to ask them?
Yeah, so there's one of my favorite pieces of research is this Arthur Aaron's work. It's a classic on how he and his co-authors brought people into the lab and they got people to ask questions to each other, and they instructed the dyad. So they put participants into little groups of two. They didn't know each other before the study, and they got each group of two to ask each other questions. And they started with kind of the safest questions, the less disclosive questions first, and then they gradually got into kind of deeper and deeper questions, like what's your biggest regret in life, and really kind of hefty stuff. And they found that relative to control situations, that getting people to ask questions to each other and to share in this way of like increased revelation produced liking among these dyads. But then as a counterpoint, we have some research where we asked people questions. Now, these were different types of questions. These were very direct questions. And we systematically varied the order in which we asked people the questions. So some people started with kind of the easiest questions first, and they got progressively harder. Other people, we started with the hardest questions first, and they got progressively easier. And then we had another version where people were just asked in kind of a random order. And in contrast to what Aaron found, we actually found that people disclosed more when you started with the most sensitive questions. My conclusion, or one conclusion, is that, if you sort of warm up and start with this easy questions and then you gradually build rapport, but we found that the opposite can lead to more revelation. And so you think about, well, how do you square away these two different findings? And one way that we have been thinking about it is comes down to this goal of the interaction. So if the goal is to foster a relationship and if it's a very cooperative environment, then starting with the easing your way into things, I think, is conducive to accomplishing that goal. But if, on the other hand, the goal is a competitive situation where the goal is information elicitation, then starting with the most sensitive questions can increase disclosure overall. It's, again, though, not without its risk. Like, if the first question you ask is extremely sensitive, you risk really offending the person and having them walk away from you. So not without its risks, but...
And there's a lot going on with tone, too, right? Talk to us a little bit about sort of how to ask these questions, not just what you ask.
Well, we've found that, especially when you're asking for a sensitive question, our kind of inclination might be we should adopt a very somber tone, and we should really reiterate to the person that everything's confidential, don't worry, it's going to be okay, whatever you say. But what we found is that sometimes the more assurances we give to people, the more worrisome it is for that person to disclose. And so what we find is that if you're a little more casual about it and nonchalant about the way you ask questions, that can make the other party more comfortable responding to your questions.
What are some of the ways in which the dynamics are different when you're in a group versus when you're just interviewing or talking to with someone one-on-one?
Conversational dynamics change profoundly when the group gets larger, and question asking dynamics change in particular. It depends on the composition of the group. Are there men, women? What are their ages? Who's the leader? What are their status relationships? There are norms around all of these things about who should be asking questions, who's expected to ask questions, and who's expected to answer them. And anytime that you can break those norms, so if you're expected to answer questions, why not try asking one instead? Anytime you can break those norms, I think it keeps things engaging and interesting.
It also introduces a host of problems, potential problems. If you think of a goal, an important goal of asking and answering questions is, of course, information sharing. And when I think of group contexts, you have new risks, including the loudest voices are the ones that are heard, or the people, put differently, the people that are most comfortable speaking up in groups are the ones that say things. But your comfort in speaking up in groups is unrelated to oftentimes, I would venture to say, is unrelated to whether you have good things to say. And so you have this, if you're trying to get diverse perspectives, intelligent things said, it can be a worry in group contexts is that kind of a few dominating personalities end up doing all the talking. And they may have good things to say, but it may also be to the neglect of hearing from people who also have good and diverse additional points to contribute.
One thing we see with our students a lot, and I think this happens in a lot of work contexts as well, and Leslie and I are both young women faculty members, that certain members of the group, and this happens with women, and I think just young people broadly, or maybe low status people, feel like they need to have something really great to say. Like they need to have a brilliant statement to make in order to speak up and say something in a group context. Turns out that it's really, really useful to just be the person who asks questions that might open a new important topic area or guide the conversation in a useful way.
So if you are put on the spot by someone's question, what is a kind of a good way to prepare for that? Because on the one hand, we're giving advice to managers to help them ask more questions, to get more information, be more likable. That sounds great. But if managers listen to this and go back to their offices and are suddenly like asking a million questions, what should their teams know about kind of this new communicating with them?
They're going to like them better, so maybe it doesn't matter. No, I think about this a lot. In any situation, there are questions that you hope no one asks you because you know it will make you feel really nervous and really uncomfortable on the spot. Many of those questions can be anticipated. Almost always they can be anticipated. You just have to ask yourself, like, what are the things someone could ask me that will keep me up at night, that will make me feel awful, and write them down, right? So if you have an important presentation, an important meeting, and there are questions that you're afraid someone will ask, don't run away from that. Confront it, write them down, write down pithy, succinct responses to them, practice saying the answers out loud, or practice your dodges out loud. For any question that you could possibly get, there is a way to answer it and there's a way to dodge it. So just not being surprised and caught off guard is a huge help in those moments.
I totally agree. Preparation is so important. And also the act of preparation, the self-reflection, I think you can learn a lot about yourself and about the situation just by doing that preparation. For what it's worth, my favorite go-to of when I gasp, haven't prepared, or don't know what I'm going to say, and I'm asked a question, and I'm like, I don't know what to say. My favorite line of defense is deflection by question asking.
Yeah.
Why do you ask? Or
what do you think?
What do you think? Or in class, does everybody think this? Or, there's the deflection by question, I think whenever I'm in a bind in that, being asked a question that I don't know how to answer, it's a good kind of back pocket go-to strategy.
Yeah. I will say two more quick strategies. One is if you can practice your humor skills, jokes are a really, really easy way to dodge things because people are so distracted laughing that they forget what question was asked and that you didn't answer it. And the second thing is use sparingly. It's okay to be honest that you don't know an answer. And I think a lot of professors actually forget this, and managers as well. It's okay to reveal that you're not superhuman and have all the answers in the world. So use sparingly. It can actually be very humble, a great humility strategy to say like, wow, that's a great question. I actually hadn't thought of that before. Let me go back to my team. Let me go back to my office and reflect about it, and I'll get back to you later today.
One thing not to do is kind of explicitly opt out of answering. So on a survey, that would be, checking the I choose not to answer box. But in a conversation, if someone asks you a pointed question, you don't want to answer it, is saying, I don't want to answer that, or in some way conspicuously not answering the question. So we've found that strategy is actually worse than saying something really unflattering about yourself. So it's actually better if you're faced with a question where if you answer it truthfully, it might reveal some unglamorous fact about yourself. We find that if you just come clean and answer it, you'll come off better. People will like you more. They'll think you more trustworthy relative to if you completely opt out of answer, if you conspicuously abstain from answering.
Right. So if you're in a job interview and someone's like, well, I see you left your last job after only working there a month. What's going on?
I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, right. That's like a big waving red flag. So just come up with something to say in that moment is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you notice how many times the word context was used in that segment? Context of white supremacy. Gus T. Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy. Today's date, Thursday, August 16th, 2018. So I have been told this is our weekly session, Neutralizing Workplace Racism. If we have any victims of white supremacy, you ask spectacular questions, and if that is a part of your strategy that has allowed you to escape any accusations of wrongdoing, you have a plush office or workspace. You get all the vacation days you want, no problem. Sick days if you need them. Any emergencies come up, no problem. If you need a transfer, done in a second. If you have found yourself in that enviable position, please be the first person to dial in and give us lots of details. What questions did you ask? How have you been able to put yourself in that situation? What can we do to be like you? 641-715-3640. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Certainly if we have folks who, if you're not able to participate, or if you have problems, rather, difficulties, you have not got yourself to that secure position on the job, if you would like counter-racist suggestions to kind of help you figure out maybe some strategies to minimize some of the problems that you're experiencing, certainly give us a ring. 641-715-3640. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. If you're not able to use the phone or dial in, you can drop an email untiljustice@gmail.com. untiljustice@gmail.com. Drop an email and we can read your comments, or if it's a question, if you're soliciting counter-racist suggestions, you can email that as well. We'll read your question and give our thoughts on the air. I played a segment last week from Harvard Business Review that was talking about the difficulty that minorities have opening up on the job and revealing information about themselves to whites. And I said that I thought that that was just terrible information, dangerous really, in the context of white supremacy. Made me feel really great about the work we're doing on the cows. That segment I thought was a little better. Context said many times, racism not mentioned at all. They kept saying, we're women. We're women. I thought it should have, we're white women. See, we said that for years. When they say women, it's implied. The only women on the planet are white. It's implied. White women. White women. White women. Anyway, racism not mentioned when they talked about downtrodden, low status people who might sometimes not speak up or ask a question, or feel that, they can't ask a question unless they have a really brilliant question, whatever that means, where sometimes just asking the basic, simple questions can be most effective and sometimes are most important. Just basic, simple questions to make sure that the fundamentals have, in fact, been covered, or whatever else, that comes to mind to ask a question about. I thought they did have some very interesting points in the exchange. I thought it was particularly interesting on a conversation with a lot of white women. It might have been 3 white women present, and they were talking towards the end about what to do to deflect. If you're asked a question and you don't want to answer it truthfully, or you don't know the answer to the question, but you don't want to admit that you don't know. What are ways to deflect from answering? And they gave a whole section on that. And it included using jokes. It included, it was humor, distraction, and then finally it was use sparingly, honesty, and admitting that you don't know. But that was use sparingly, be honest, and admit that you don't know. But before we get to that, then you can, distract. You can ask a question. That's tons of whites who have done that. They will answer your question with a question. You got to watch that, because sometimes we're so anxious as victims of white supremacy to speak that we'll just end up speaking for 8 minutes. And it's, wait a minute, I asked them a question and they didn't respond. You got to watch that. You got to watch that. Answering with a question, the humor, the distraction. They had that was just what they shared there. I'm sure they got some more tricks in the bag, as they say, to get out of being asked a question. Be mindful of that. If they pull that in the job, someone asks a question and they pull one of these strategies, make sure you hang on a second. I don't think that question was answered, ma'am, sir. They asked for you to give a response to the question. What is your response, ma'am, sir, to the question? Sometimes it's important to that. I don't know what the word is for that, but sometimes a question is asked and the person who was asked the question will dodge. Sometimes you need a person to remember that question was asked and they will redirect back to the question. I don't know if there's an official name for that, or maybe we should come up with a term for that. That is important as well. You have to be a good listener to recognize that, they've dodged a question. I'm going to make sure that, put it back on them. Make sure you answer that question. From that segment, they said asking questions doesn't hurt. They said that sometimes people are reluctant to ask questions because they'll think there'll be some sort of penalty or they'll get in trouble. That's why I said I thought it was interesting that, or not more than interesting, significant, suspicious, that racism, white supremacy wasn't mentioned in that report at all, because we've had quite a few black people on this program say that they have been explicitly rebuked for asking questions, even sometimes told explicitly, stop asking so many questions, or you ask too many questions. We've had a number of people who said that in a workplace context explicitly. So for black people, I don't know, is that true? Asking questions doesn't hurt. That said, I do strongly encourage asking questions. I think that it's just hugely important. As they said, that's how you learn. That is transfer of information, just being able to ask and learn. Try to ask lots of questions in a workplace context so that you are learning. I was speaking with Mr. Fuller 2 days ago, and he said that whites in every situation, they work to make sure that they are the least confused person there. If you ask a lot of questions, you might end up being the least confused person there. And generally, I would say people who ask a lot of questions, they're going to be on the less confused end of what's happening. People who ask a lot of questions and people who ask get really good at refining asking questions so that they don't have to ask 20 questions. They can ask 3 good questions and wrap things up. They don't have to waste time with a whole lot of things. I would say those people are probably going to end up being a lot less confused about things. Not necessarily, but asking questions is great. Even if the person doesn't answer your question, that is an answer. You have learned something, even if they don't respond to your question. You can make a note of that, put that in your electronic file or what have you. So many things to discuss today. The number again, 641-715-3640. The code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Has anyone that is with us live, has anyone gotten in trouble? Or even if you didn't get in trouble, but did it become even a minor source of conflict, you asking questions, particularly you questioning white people in a workplace setting? Has that been an issue for anyone? I would be curious to know that. And as I said, even with that, continue to ask questions. And in fact, I'll get another one. What is a question? What is one of your, if you have a list of questions or just questions that you tend to ask in a workplace, if you could share one question that you think is essential that we should ask in a workplace setting, that every Black person, every non-white person, every victim of white supremacy, this is a question that you should definitely ask in a workplace setting. If you have a counter-racist workplace code, this should be there. Questions people, think we should ask for the job. I think that'd be a good one to share. Yoga, workplace racism for Gus T. Our exam is tomorrow. We're not having the book club. I think this is like it's a very limited number of times since we've been on the air where we've not had a book club, because we have a 5-hour class to do our exam. We have a written exam, we have an oral exam, and then we have to teach an actual class. And they're not even allowing us to have visitors. It's been so disorganized. I was so excited and looking forward to having visitors. There were C.O.W.S listeners who had planned to come up and hang out, and they're not even allowing visitors. It was so disorganized. We were asking for exact details about the teaching scenario coming up for this Friday. And even as of Sunday, the instructors were not themselves clear on what exactly was going to take place. And unprofessional, disorderly. Anyway, the highlight of the unprofessional and disorderly conduct in the yoga class, and this goes back to something that's bedrock and what we talked about for workplace racism for a long time: policy and procedure. So again, the exam is tomorrow. The class we had most recently was yesterday, so it was 2 days for exam. And so we had received an email that said, you have to complete, these questions in your manual. Make sure you finish up these questions for the week. And it was a substantial number of questions, like more than 20. Quite a bit of questions. But the thing was not, even if it had been one question, one yes or no question, the issue, the problem, the incorrectness was we had already inquired about whether or not these questions had to be done like more than a week ago. And we had asked the lead white instructor, the head super advisor, do we have to do these questions? Yes or no? No, you do not have to do them because we did not assign the questions from the beginning of class, and it would be wrong to wait until a month in and then say, oh, by the way, you got to do these questions. That was a week ago. Fast forward to this week, we get the email, make sure you do all these questions to prepare. I immediately, as soon as we get to class, what is this in the email about us having to do these questions? And she has like a coy smile, the white woman, lead instructor, lead advisor. And she says, oh yeah, we'll get to that later. And not answering your question, I immediately responded, I'm very distracted about this issue. I would prefer for this to be addressed immediately. Sometimes that's good to say because I've seen where they'll do that before. And that, in my view, is a red flag. Pardon the metaphor. But that is a significant problem. I think that's something that's incorrect. If it's something where there is a problem or potential problem and someone asks a question and you say, oh, no, we'll get to this. I have my own timetable for that. We'll get to this whenever. That has happened a few times in class where someone asked a question about something serious and they said, oh, we'll get to this, whenever. That is totally incorrect. If someone is seeking information, particularly information where there might be a problem that they're trying to address, that should be resolved right now. In my opinion, there should be no reason, and that should not be something where it's a habit out of someone seeking information and they are told, be patient. We'll get around to that, at some time. Just be patient and you'll get the information you need. That is not something that you want to see happening on a routine basis. Anyway, So she says, okay. And she says with the questions, it would be good to study to prepare, but no, you're not required to do them, which contradicts what was said in the email, but does confirm what was said originally. And I'm disgusted with all of this because this is wasting time. That's something that I've talked about as well. Efficient use of time and energy. That whites, they love to waste our time. Anyway, I ended up contacting the CEO of the company, the whole franchise of yoga studios, as well as the Seattle area manager to voice my displeasure. And that's something that can be very, very effective. Writing and contacting, especially contacting more powerful whites if there is a problem. And they did follow up immediately to address the issue, and I didn't, curse. And even within the letter, I asked 2 questions. Is this because I was saying that the training had been unprofessional and disorderly? And I said, is this the policy? And I cited examples of things that were incorrect, them flagrantly contradicting, what they were telling us with regards to our obligation to assignments. And I said, is this, in accordance with how teacher trainings are supposed to operate according to your franchise? Question. Is this setting students up for success? And I thought that is a great question, because that is one of the 10 essentials of a yoga class, according to their manual, probably going to be on our exam tomorrow, is setting your students up for success. So is this setting your students up for success, having random and inconsistent expectations of your students? And I'm going to make sure that I emphasize when I speak with this different white woman, more powerful white woman tomorrow, emphasize that these were not rhetorical questions, that I would like answers to both questions, and then we can proceed, because it should be no and no. But writing, Dr. Kanban talked about that. Writing, it can be very, very important in the workplace strategically, especially using emails and what have you. It can be very, very helpful in getting problems solved. And I mean quickly getting problems solved in the workplace. And I cannot emphasize enough policy and procedure. And the reason that I was so bothered by this, because I even had to take a few moments to think about that, because it was resolved where it didn't, I didn't have to do any extra work, but that wasn't the point. The point was, and what I would suggest to other victims of racism, especially black people, if you're in a workplace setting where whites are consistently, in my view, they are flagrantly not abiding by their policy, especially situations where you ask direct questions. What is going to be required of me? What are we going to have to do tomorrow? What are we going to have to do in the next hour? And they tell you explicitly with no ambiguity, oh yeah, this is what you're going to have to do, X, Y, and Z. Are you going to have to work tomorrow? No. Explicitly. No confusion. And then they come back and totally contradict that a day later, 2 weeks later. That is an extremely dangerous environment on any, even if it's something trivial. If you notice that happening on a regular basis, oh man, and then I would be and really under any circumstances, I encourage you to know the policy and procedure at least as well as the most powerful whites at the job, as best you can. They will probably know a little bit more just because they're writing the policy and hiding bits of it and all that. But really, that is the goal that we should be striving for. Know the policy and procedure well. And that's something that even through the course of training, I got kind of a reputation for. I think I cited the issue before where they tried, and it was the same thing, giving us an assignment that had already been handed out. And I said that was already in the email. Are you all not checking? Are you all not on schedule with what we're supposed to be doing? And they went checked and had to acknowledge, yep, he's correct. Sorry about that. That was already assigned. Really be a stickler, as they say, about policy and procedure. It's not saying that you need to go around and be rude, nasty, confrontational about it, but really point out when things are not in accordance with policy and procedure. And it's really just about, hey, I just want to make sure that I'm in accordance. I want to make sure that I'm not, picking up habits or seeing things and thinking that that's okay when it's not okay, because this is not what is in accordance with policy and procedure. And I also say, when you get in those environments where it's just flagrant and it's no real thought to violating policy and procedure, that is the sort of environment where racism, white supremacy is going to thrive. Really, anti-blackness, period. Because I've been in those sort of environments where there are no whites, and it was still absolutely awful. The anti-blackness raged out of control. But when you're in environments where there's really no code, there's no decorum with how we're going to behave, Black people are going to be fleeced. They're going to be flagrantly abused. That's what's going to happen. I would really encourage Black people, workplace environment, classroom environment, really be a stickler about policy and procedure and pointing out when there are violations of policy and procedure. Again, you're not doing it like you got a gun on your hip and you're taking somebody to jail because things have been violated. But I mean, just, making note that, hey, we are supposed to be adhering to a set of rules or a code, I thought. Number again, 641-715-3640. The code 564-943#. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Again, do you have a question that you think every Black person, every victim of white supremacy should have in their counter-racist knapsack, a question that should be asked on the job? And do we have any folks listening right now who can say, oh yeah, I am a Negro and I've been on the job and I have been rebuked for asking too many questions? Or any other, if you need suggestions, counter-racist input on your situation, certainly feel free to chime in. Folks who dialed in with a hand up, line should be open. Feel free to participate.
Can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am. Greetings, Draftomania.
Greetings, Gus. So, give you my workplace racism update. Yesterday, as I was preparing to go in, I worked the night shift. So as I was preparing to go in, I got a phone call and was told that basically that I shouldn't come in because the client that because I work at a call center, just to go back through what I had been talking about with the show, what happened before. I started working on this new database that they just threw me on and didn't train me. I began working on that on the 11th of July. And I discussed it with you and the rest of the guests on the show. Knew it was basically like a setup because I wasn't trained. So when I got the call yesterday, it was from I guess one of the trainers or supervisors or what have you. And being that it's a call center, the call center works for clients. The client gives them their basically we have to dial for these clients. So she said that they have some issues with some of the calls I've been making, some of my calls, and I shouldn't come in, and that they're taking me off the phone, and I'm suspended. So she didn't give me any more detail about what it was, what exactly it is that I'd done, wrong. But I can imagine, being that I wasn't trained, of course, of course I'm not going to, it's something that's going to be wrong, you know what I mean? So that was basically the call that I got yesterday. So what I ended up doing, I called one of my friends, and I had a bunch of my stuff there still at the facility. So I asked him, "Well, do you think I should go get my stuff?" And And he was like, well, if I was you, I would go get my stuff, being that you can go get it and get it early or whatever. Because of course, like this is like all of a setup for, my exit, them trying to get me out of there. So I went up there and I just cleaned out my locker, and then and I had to catch 2 buses to go up there. I got my stuff out, and I came back home. So what I did today is I called Mr. Fuller, and I asked him, just try to get his feedback, and he basically told me to write a letter and address it to all parties involved about and basically taking it to the amendment, what is it, the Fifth and the 14th Amendments, because I live in North Carolina, and this is a at will state. They can basically do whatever they want. But since I've been calling in, I've seen this coming, like this sneaky tactics that they use to try to get you out of there. So I don't know. My thing is, I also would text one of my one of the supervisors that was supervising me on the night shift. She texted me within the same night and told me that she's no longer coming back. What they ended up doing with her, I guess she had a mate that was working there, and what they did, they gave him the job. They advanced him and allowed him to to get promoted. And then after he got promoted, they fired him. So I mean, it's a lot of trashy, trifling, terroristic behaviors that this company is pulling. I told you about the time when the VP called me when I was on my day off and things like that. So I kind of knew that when they just threw me on those phones and doing that database without training, that was somewhat like a setup. And then I was told by the supervisors that that's their way of doing things. Nobody at that company was trained. They just throw you out to the wolves. And that's not true, because when I started training, what happened was their projector was down, so they didn't get a chance to train us on this actual database that we have to use in order to schedule these patients and things like that. So I don't know as far as like what I can do when it comes down to because they didn't give me no detail. Usually from what I heard is that when a client asks you to come get off the phone, then it's like really, if the client is requesting you to get off the phone, I don't even know if there's really much that they can do. I don't know. Like I said, they didn't give me a time limit. They didn't tell me anything. So I don't even know as far as unemployment or anything. I don't know what my rights are as far as that. But Mr. Fuller was telling me I should go ahead and get this letter out immediately. But I was wondering also, of course I want you guys' feedback, but I was also wondering, like, when I addressed this letter to them, should I send it email or should I mail it, or how? He just told me I should get it to them as soon as possible because they already put me on suspension. So that's what I'm going through.
I'm not surprised, but sorry to hear about the workplace terrorism you are enduring. Dr. Cambon has been on the program and talked about this sort of situation, and he advocates a written letter. I know he's even talked about a postcard because that can, make it a more public thing. And he's saying, this day and age, hey, you can make it personalized. You can put whatever picture you want on the front of it and then write it out on the back. But either way, a written letter, he is a big proponent of that makes a big impact. If you're writing something, especially if it's going to manage your higher ups and they're getting a handwritten document, I certainly see where that can be effective. I also think, I see the value of an electronic communication, because that automatically creates a record that's time-stamped, undeniable, that, boop, this is what you submitted, this is exactly what was said, the exact date and time, that everybody was included. And sometimes that can generate a more rapid response. Like the situation with my yoga thing, I sent the email, I think at 9, and I got a response within like 2 hours. That I don't know if you could get a response that quickly if you do the handwritten letter thing. So there are advantages, disadvantages both ways. But I think
Mm-hmm.
as long as you're getting it written promptly and getting it written to all parties concerned, and you could even do both. You could write the letter and then email to just let all parties know that letter is coming and that they can you know notify you when they just to confirm that they did get the written letter or what have you. But I don't know that one is necessarily better than the other. I think they're just advantages, disadvantages depending on what you do, what you're trying to accomplish.
Right.
I guess
And
listeners, I'm
are you
sorry.
familiar with the? I'm sorry. You're familiar with the basically, Mr. Fuller was telling me that to state that that as pertains to my employment at the facility, that due to the due process is defended and supported as required by the Fifth and 14th Amendments to the Constitution of the United States, specifically as it pertains to the training procedures prior to testing procedure. And he says, please reply. And I think it was another part out because I was walking. It was another part that oh yeah, he told me to also state that I want an investigation done immediately because, like I said, they was very invasive, and I'm not sure like what I can do as far as if anybody has any information as far as unemployment or whatever during a suspension or what is it my rights or what I should do in order to look into that. But I'm pretty sure you kind of probably stagnated when they're not just being direct. That they're just just playing with you, so you can't go through your due process. So I just wanted some feedback as far as that's concerned. Also,
Got it.
thank you.
I am very familiar with the way that Mr. Fuller instructs or suggests that victims of racism deal with in terms of the language and using the Fifth and 14th Amendment in the workplace in terms of due process and equal protection, using that as a counter racist strategy in the workplace. I have not had to write that letter or even been solicited to help someone write that letter, although the gist of it, if what I heard correctly from you, is basically you're writing to make sure that your constitutional rights to due process and equal protection of the law are not violated, and specifically
Hmm.
about getting access to adequate training in order to be able to
Hmm.
complete your responsibilities and duties. I'm paraphrasing, but if it's something to that respect, and then an investigation into this matter to make sure that things were done in a correct manner, in a just manner, however you want to say it. If that's what it is, that does not sound too difficult. Like that would seem like just, kind of sitting down and putting the words together that you want to say. Like it, because I mean, I,
Yeah, he even told me just that's exactly what I'm going to write. Like exactly what I just read to you. That's exactly what I'm going to write.
yeah, I have not had to write that myself, or I have not had to help anybody else do it, but it doesn't seem like that seems like something that would be like a paragraph, 5 sentences. Boop,
Hmm.
and he's talked about that. You want to be concise. You don't want to take up, sheets and sheets and reams and be talking forever. Concise, right to the point,
Hmm.
bang. So, yeah. Are there, I guess, any folks that are listening in, if we have anyone, if you've had to write that letter, or if you have thoughts about doing the handwritten document for this form or doing an electronic submission of this form, any thoughts on those 2 points? Let's see.
Can I be
Madison.
heard?
Yes, ma'am. This is our codified software developer.
Yes, I have not had to write that letter. However, I would advise to send it via email rather than handwritten, as you will have as you will have documentation as to whether they received it or not, because it can be very difficult to track that with a handwritten letter as opposed to an electronic submission. That's all I have. I'll mute my line.
Good point. Good point.
Thank you.
Any other listeners with any recommendations on whether handwritten over electronic submission, and then if any folks have had to write that letter specifically?
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Yes, this is Ken Steele. I'm calling from Los Angeles, California, and I wanted to say I don't recommend submitting a handwritten letter for anything. If you are going to submit a hard copy of a letter, it's more professional to type it out so that you have the maximum legibility. Plus, when you type things out, they have a spell checker on there so that you don't misspell any words. It's pretty hard to make an effective point if you have misspellings or syntax errors throughout your letter. A good word processor can account for this. And then you can go ahead and print it out and then sign it. That's the only thing that needs to be written by hand is your signature. And if you are going to submit it by hand, I would also submit it with some sort of a certified mail service, be it FedEx or UPS. That way you can get tracking, and then you can have them sign for it, just so that, they make sure they get it. But moreover than that, I would suggest consulting a lawyer. And in fact, I would suggest gathering your friends who have had similar experiences where they were, I guess, forced out of this position. And you can all go ahead, and once you find a good lawyer, somebody that you trust, somebody that will take your case, then you can go ahead and say, I have 3, or even while you're in the initial consultation, I have 3 other people who have experienced similar circumstances to me or were forced out of this position unjustly. You might want to hear their stories too. And if they have a strong enough case with multiple people, and then they can find documentation for any sort of wrongdoing or any sort of consistent pattern, what they call a preponderance of evidence, to suggest that there's some violations taking place, then you would have a really good case on your hands, and you could stand to make some money. But you'd have to exercise a little patience with that strategy. And on top of that, one benefit to that strategy is that if you do it while you're still technically employed, then you're protected against what they call retaliation for about 90 days. So you're protected in your position, and you can go ahead and use that time to find another job. But I would suggest that as they're putting you on suspension, I would just suggest doing that as well, looking for other employment, and also in your spare time, consulting a lawyer to see if you do have any sort of case for wrongful termination or discrimination or any other of the legal statutes that you may qualify for in your jurisdiction. And that's my suggestion. Or also, just electronic submission, way faster response. You can CC everybody. And you can make sure that everybody sees that you've CC'd everybody, and it's just a superior form of communication, I think, than submitting hard copies. It's just too expensive, too slow. Anyway, I'll go ahead and mute my line. Thank you.
Much obliged, Mr. Steele. Any other suggestions? Drapetomania. Does she do the handwritten submission, electronic submission, and then I guess if any thoughts on the letter with regards to due process, some of what Mr. Fuller was recommending that she write about?
Gus, I just wanted to say one thing in response to Ken Stowe. Mr. Fuller was saying, he always kind of deters you from like seeking a lawyer, because it's expensive, and I don't have that type of money, or I don't have any type of money to employ a lawyer. So
if you have a case, they'll take it on a contingency basis. If you have a case, if you don't, then they won't take your case, and they'll start charging you stuff. If they start charging you money, you probably don't have a very strong case. You probably want to just walk away at that point. But if you do have a case, they're going to invest money into you. They're going to make sure that their client is taken care of. So that's something to consider. So
okay,
the moment you start asserting your rights according to the law, you better know what you're talking about when you do that. And you better be very accurate. And the best way to ensure that is to employ a legal professional to make out such, letters. So that's my suggestion.
And that was one of the reasons why he told me to go the route of the amendment, because this is an at-will state, and they can basically just do whatever they want to do. So we're not even going to the policies and procedures. It's just like, it's just certain things that you're supposed to do. You're supposed to give people training. And he said he called it the 3 stages of the job, employment, the 3 T's, telling, training, and testing. And that's the thing that they didn't do. So that's a violation of the amendments. He was saying take that approach.
I was thinking of Mr. Edward Williams, counter-racism.com. I know he and Mr. Fuller, folks have contacted them with workplace problems for a long time, like years and years and years. And there have to be people that are alive who have said, oh, yes, I'll give that a try. Mr. Fuller's, suggestion about the 5th and 14th amendment, I'll give that a try. Like, some of those people have to be alive. Like, it would be good to, same thing that I say here, like to get the follow-up. It would be good to hear from some of those people I applied that method. This is what happened. Like, if there are like, that would be great.
I've heard somebody named Prince. I think I was listening to the archives. As one of your callers named Princess used that strategy at one point. Because I listen to your workplace racism all the time, and Princess, she was having some issues on the job, and she used the 4th and 5th, the 5th and 14th Amendment.
Yep, she's called in regularly, especially for workplace racism, and specifically, she's called Mr. Fuller a lot to try to help get suggestions on how to deal with some similar problems that she's been having for quite some time. So she would be one, and I think, and that's why I said there have to be others. Like, I think that would be helpful. Like, if they could, even if they called in here, if we have any folks who are listeners, if you've contacted Mr. Fuller, or even if you didn't contact him, if you just heard him, on a program or what have you, given that strategy, and you've tried it, how did it go? That would be really helpful just to hear how folks respond to that. Was it constructive? Did it at least give you a little bit more time to, strategize how you wanted to move forward? Like, that would be really helpful. If we have listeners, please share. If you're not able to call in or willing to call in, you can email and just let us know how things went. If you felt like, you executed the strategy correctly and it worked out, let us know. If you feel like you executed correctly and it didn't work, let us know. Either would be helpful. Any other suggestions?
Right. And one other thing, Gus, can I please have Edward Williams' contact information, if at all possible?
Yes, ma'am. I can.
Does he have a radio station or something?
Counter-racism.com. That's the website he's operated for a number of years. And there's a work study. There's counter-racist audio, counter-racist radio broadcasting, and he's done a lot of work with workplace racism and suggestions for things that happen on the job. And he has some of that on the work study page. He's been a guest on this program talking about it. And I suspect he would be all right with me getting you his contact information so that you could maybe ask him a question or two about this process, because I think he's helped. I'm sure, and I think some of that is on the website where he's helped people with similar workplace problems and kind of seen them through the whole process.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard him on the show also. So I listen to like so many of your shows. I'm a big fan of yours. So yeah, I will definitely look into that, and I really appreciate all your help.
Indeed. Are there any other folks who had suggestions, handwritten versus the electronic submission, or employing Fourth, 15th Amendment? I'll ask again as we proceed. Other folks who dialed in, if you have a hand up, comments to share your own situation, or comments on what's been shared thus far, line should be open. Proceed.
Can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to very quickly follow up with the discussion regarding the suspension. I've worked in human resources for the past 14 years, and I also live in North Carolina. I would recommend that you send an email with a read receipt so that you know you have a time and date stamp of when it was sent, and also that it was opened by whoever it was that you addressed the email to. And even though North Carolina is an at-will state, and this goes for any state that's an at-will state, there are still policies that your organization must follow. If they have a written policy as to how they terminate employees, what the statutes or requirements are for suspending an employee, they still have to follow those procedures. So while it is an at-will state, there's a very large asterisk next to that. So there's still legal protections that you have as an employee, so you can't simply just be terminated for any reason whatsoever. If you do decide to go the attorney route, having some form of documentation would be very helpful. An attorney would be very hesitant to take on your case if you don't have any paperwork that supports any of the things that you've said. So if you have some sort of document that the company provided you stating what your training schedule was, maybe there was a matrices that you received at the beginning of your employment that stated what type of training you would receive. If you have documentation that you did not receive that training, something along those lines would be most helpful. Because as soon as you talk about getting counsel, your organization is going to call their counsel, and they have very deep pockets to have as many attorneys on hand to combat the case as they need, and they can stay in court much longer than you can. So if you decide to go that route, be prepared with some pretty solid documentation, at least initially. They can always subpoena emails if they decide to take on the case. But if you don't have anything that would initially entice the attorney to take on your case, I would be very skeptical to go that route. And that's my advice.
Much obliged. Much obliged. Other folks, if you have either commentary on what has been shared thus far, or if you have your own situation you'd like to address, line should be open. Proceed.
Can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, good evening, Gus. Good evening to all the callers and listeners. Codified software developer again. Just a quick update. I wanted to thank both Stacy and Ken Steele for their words of advice over the past few months. So I've been utilizing LinkedIn to try to get some information on what's out there in my industry and to see if I can possibly find a new position. And I think a couple of weeks ago I called in and said that there was someone claiming to be a recruiter from a very well-known tech company, very large, very well-known, very ubiquitous tech company. And that I was unsure if it was them or if it was somebody at my job playing around as they had been. And Stacy recommended that I ask for an official email from that person, and I did and received the official email. So this person was from that company. It was a recruiter from that company. And I spoke with that person today and had a very promising discussion. And I just wanted to say for anybody who is in IT who may be looking to brush up on their skills or get more information regarding other languages that they may not be familiar with, there are two specific websites that I was given by this particular recruiter, and I'd just like to give them very briefly. One is LEET, L as in Larry, E as in Edward, E as in Edward, T as in Thomas, code.com, and the other one is Hacker, Rank, R-A-N as in Nancy, K as in Kite.com. And those two websites they'll allow you to brush up on everything that you learned in school that you may have forgotten through any sort of enterprise development, and allow you to learn new languages to better position yourself to be put into, or better position yourself to get a new and much better position. With that, I will mute my line. Thanks so much for letting me share.
Spectacular. I'm very glad to hear that was a legitimate offer, and sounds like it's getting more promising. Hopefully you'll be able to transition to a better IT plantation, and you can leave all of the rubbish behind and wish the non-black, non-white male, you can wish him well as you shove off, and hopefully he'll be more codified. But that's fantastic. Very glad to hear. And did you how shall I say, did you feel some type of way about your paranoia with the initial offer?
No, I mean, I think it's best to, I mean, the situation I was in, it was unclear. I'm glad that I did at least reach out to this person in a very codified manner, a very neutral manner. But I was glad that I reached out to this person in a way that would allow me to continue dialogue with this person. I think had I let my paranoia overwhelm me, I would not have done that, and I probably would have missed out on an opportunity. So I think it goes back to what you say about, having courage. I think sometimes we do get very fearful of anything. That's what this system is designed to do, and sometimes we just need to take a leap of faith and see what's going on. Hopefully that answers the question.
Absolutely. Courageous software developer in Wisconsin. Fantastic. Context of White Supremacy. Other folks who dialed in, if you have commentary you would like to share, feel free. Either if you have suggestions on what's been shared thus far, or if you have your own situation, proceed.
May I be heard?
Yes, sir.
This is Jay from NYC. I'd like to thank you, Gus, for the platform, listeners and callers. Again, I'd like to give a thank you to software developer, codified software developer. I appreciated the information, and I actually was listening. I just got on the line, and I basically was trying to do some things in the background, but I heard you mention two websites that were relevant as far as expanding skill set, as far as language and coding. I didn't get all of them, though. If possible, I'm actually going to be replying to you shortly, but if you could send them, that would be greatly appreciated. Also, I do have some negative and positive news as far as on my side. At my job, there was a theft that occurred. Unfortunately, the theft occurred between black males in the company. Relatively big company, and very big company, and cameras everywhere, and these guys just got caught. Unfortunately, due to the fact they were black males predominantly, well, only, that was involved in this, it spread, and now other black males that are in the company in roles and positions in IT are now under the microscope, including myself. It's a very paranoid environment. You could imagine already being paranoid, walking around a predominantly white corporation as a black male, but now it's just intensified. But so far, I've just been keeping to my work, staying on time, accomplishing the things that I need to. The good side is, as far as virtual reality, I was able to reach out to a group of individuals within the company that are doing VR work, and they actually brought me in this week to do a session with them to do a full setup, and it was definitely positive. They were definitely very inviting as far as telling me, hey, you could come by, see the system and see how we set the actual software that we use. And I'm trying to basically maintain those connections. A little difficult with the distraction of the theft in the office, but all in all, just trying to keep balance. I didn't hear the beginning of the first caller's issue when I called in, that is. But email is definitely the best way to go for every single reason that was given. Timestamp, just way more credible, and just keeps tabs on everything. My only suggestion would be to BCC yourself, so that you have it forwarded to your personal email as well, just in case. Outside of that, I'll mute my line. Thank you for your time.
Much obliged. Sorry to hear about the theft in the workplace. That is the system of white supremacy. They encourage victims of white supremacy, put us in a deprived state, and encourage us to steal. So then they go, oh, no good criminal niggers. That standard operating procedure. And then to blame all the other niggers in the building that you all are conspiring to steal the rubber bands and paper clips from the office as well. I've seen that. I have not seen that when whites, because I've worked in situations where whites were stealing, whatever, and that did not expand to all of the other whites in the building. But I've said that on the program for quite some time, that we should all be functioning in the workplace, maybe the entire system of white supremacy, but certainly while you're on the job, as though you are under surveillance all the time. Electronic surveillance, if it's another person stalking you to keep tabs on you, whatever it is, never think in a workplace, if you are a black person, that you are functioning in the shadows, quote unquote, that people are not looking at every single breath you take while you are in the facility. Meant that literally. Much obliged, good sir. Other folks who dialed in, if you have a hand up, if you have commentary to share, line should be open. Proceed.
Hello, Gus.
Let's see. Yes, was that?
Yeah, it's still me, Jackson Mania.
Yes, ma'am.
I haven't heard anybody else. What I wanted to say is I've been searching for because I was listening to your commentary when you were talking about how you were going to write the write and complain about your situation with yoga. I was under the assumption that they had the policy and procedure. I looked on one website that they use to try to, and I clicked on employee handbook and it didn't come up. And I went on their main website and it's not showing there either. I think the only policies and procedures that we ever got during training was just for the dress code. That was the only thing that I received. I don't recall receiving any other material as far as policy and procedure, or employee handbook. And like you said, whenever you are working in any place like that, and anything is sketchy when it comes down to their policies and procedures, that's a warning sign right there. So, yeah, I'm unable to get that material at all. I'm not even able to find it. And like I said, I mean, they've been doing people there so, so messed up. And it's a lot of the non-black, non-white people that, they advanced one guy, and then once they get him in a position, they went ahead and they fired him. So, and then the other, my supervisor, she left. So this week, she emailed me on the same day that they called me and told me that she's no longer coming back. And she had complained to me, like I think about 2 weeks ago, said that she didn't like what was going on there. So I mean, it's known. Even like when you go into Indeed, like the reviews for this company is horrible. It's just like I knew what I was getting into, but I needed a job at the time. So. Like I said, I just find it to be mighty funny that I'm unable to find that information.
That is something we had talked about before. That's those types of jobs where either they don't have policy and procedure, or I think we even had some people who said before that the policy and procedure was really raggedy. You could barely even read some of the pages. It was written with poor grammar. That tells you how you're going to be treated. That right there. You can't find it. We don't intend for you to be informed about how we're functioning. That lets you know that, in my opinion, you're in a very dangerous environment where we intend to not treat employees correctly. We have no intention. We do not want you to be well informed. Ask about the handbook. That'd be one question I would give. Where is the company handbook, employee handbook, policy and procedure? That's important. Yes. Where's a copy of that? Is that available online? Do you have a hard copy? Could I get a copy now? All great questions to ask at the beginning of your employment. While folks are lollygagging, which should never happen in workplace racism, we do not need spectators. This certainly is a broadcast that is not for spectators. And if we somehow have victims of racism who are listening to this broadcast who are not having workplace problems, you should certainly be an investor in...
Muted. Unmuted.
You should certainly be an investor.
Can I be heard?
And not just chatter. Hang tight, Mr. Steele. The whole situation with Omarosa that came up this week, and recordings and all of that, major controversy, might even be racial theater, in my opinion, because we are talking about quote-unquote reality television and all of that. There was a report that came out, Market Watch. Omarosa secretly recorded her co-workers think very carefully before doing the same. This was published earlier today. Jacob Passy, Passy, I think that's how you say it, suspected racist. So he talks about, I'm not going to read the whole article, but he talks about, she did the recording and blah, blah, blah. She released some of it. If you're thinking that you're going to do the same, you should think. So he goes... laws regarding recording conversations fall into two categories: one-party consent and two-party consent. 38 states and the District of Columbia have one-party consent laws regarding recording conversations, meaning that only one person in the conversation needs to know that a recording is being made for it to be legal. This is also the standard at the federal level. For 11 states, two-party consent laws are in place, which requires the person making the recording to get approval from everyone engaged in the conversation for it to be legal. These states include California, Connecticut, Florida, Illinois, Montana, Nevada, and Washington, among others. Massachusetts state law bans secret recordings altogether. The two-party consent laws can get someone into trouble, even if the information disclosed on the recording is of legal importance. Linda Tripp, for instance, was initially indicted on wiretapping charges for recording phone calls with Monica Lewinsky. That's not the portion I wanted. This was the portion I wanted. Your boss may be allowed to record you. You should just insert racist man, racist woman. In some states, employers are required by law to notify their staff if they record workers in some way, such as taping calls, and even then, employers typically can only record calls or workroom conversations if they pertain to business matters. But if a staff member is talking about something personal, they are supposed to stop recording. Additionally, employers are required to have a legitimate business reason to record their employees. Rules pertaining to recordings cannot violate employees' rights based on the National Labor Relations Act, said Jonathan Siegel, a partner at Philadelphia-based law firm Duane Morris. In particular, employers may not record workers for the purpose of monitoring union-related activities. However, legal standards for recording employees exist in a relative, watch it, gray area. According to Donna Ballman, an employment lawyer based in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, employers have argued pretty successfully for years that there is no expectation of privacy in the workplace. That is all in quotes. I'm going to, in fact, read that one more time. Employers have argued pretty successfully for years that there is no expectation of privacy in the workplace. That should be bedrock counter-racist code, said Baldwin, who is also the author of the book, Stand Up for Yourself Without Getting Fired. Maybe we should read that. That means they have gotten away with even surreptitious recordings in many cases. They have one more section. Actually, I'll read the last two. Recordings can be helpful in legal proceedings, particularly in cases regarding discrimination or harassment. Discrimination. Recordings of conversations with alleged perpetrator can be a useful tool for someone looking to take their case to court. But before someone goes to such lengths to tape a coworker, they should consult a lawyer, Siegel argued. They don't want to do anything that violates the law or undermines their claim while they're seeking evidence, he said. A one-off recording may bring to light a single instance of inappropriate behavior, but Siegel argued that the accused individual's attorneys could then argue that the recording was edited or made such that it took the comments or actions out of context. That could also hurt their case, he said. Therefore, a worker might want to take the risk of recording multiple instances of the inappropriate behavior if it is a common occurrence. Workers should also document inappropriate or discriminatory behavior in other ways, including writing down a recollection of what happened or emailing coworkers to see if they noticed or had similar experiences. Your boss can fire you for making a secret recording at work. Even in one-party consent states where secretly recording someone can be legal, the law will not protect workers from being terminated for their actions. If an employee is at will, their employer can terminate for any or no reason, just not an illegal reason, said Siegel. For instance, an employer could argue that the worker demonstrated a lack of respect for choosing to tape someone without their permission. Consequently, workers should check their company's policies before they choose to make a recording. And even if an employee isn't in danger of losing his or her job by making a recording, it could still have an adverse effect on their reputation. You may lose credibility when they're recording without someone's consent, Siegel said. I can post it. You can read the entire report. Again, this seemed to be sparked by, or not seemed, they got her picture at the top of the report, Omarosa Manigault Newman and her revelations about President Donald J. Trump this past week. But we do talk a lot about recordings on this broadcast. I almost feel like I should say it again for a third time. No expectation of privacy in the workplace. Non-white people should keep that in mind at all times, whether whites are present or not. Heard you, Mr. Steele. Give me 1 second just to check. Are there any folks that are with us that we've not heard from at all, who have a hand up commentary that they wanted to share? Any folks that we've missed completely?
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I'm really just listening right now. I'll probably email you though, Gus, with what my biggest workplace thing is. It's kind of complicated or whatnot, but yeah, I'm just listening right now.
Much obliged. I'll I guess keep an eye out on the email, untiljustice@gmail.com. Any other folks that have a hand up commentary that they wanted to share?
Can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay, workplace racism. So I work at Amazon, and it's a lot of work. I get a lot of complaints from people. If you hear a little rambling, it's because I'm just pulling up because I'm not going to work today. It's a lot of. I get a lot. I came into work my last day working. A lady walked up to me and was telling me that she had gotten written up for not working fast enough. And so I'm just looking at her and listening. I felt some kind of way. And she just started crying. And she's like, I worked so hard and I don't know what to do. And, you know, you do work hard, but like I stated before, it's in the department that we're in, which is PIC, they want you to find the item and place it in the little bucket that they provide that's laid out, and do that in a matter of, well, by now for us it would be 8 seconds. And a lot of the time it's not that easy to do because sometimes the people that place them in the cubbies, they just put it in any kind of way. And because they're under pressure because they have to meet the same deadline. I don't think they have to pick as quick as us, but they still have to do it quickly. And they're under pressure, you can tell. And then when the people, because so many products in one cubby, in one little, I call them cubbies because that's what they remind me of, maybe a kindergarten cubby. And there's a stack going up to F, from A to F, A to K, and from 1 to 4 over. So just to give you an idea. And you have to do this very rapidly. And it's not someone's coming, if the rate is low, like if it takes me, instead of 8 seconds, 12 seconds, they're asking you, they have people coming up asking you, how come you're not moving fast enough? And then you hurt yourself because you're moving so fast trying to meet the quota because you don't want to lose your job. And they have a whiteboard that you can put complaints on. They're very selective of what complaints they answer. And one of them was stating, how come certain managers can practice racism? And so it lets you know that inside of there, they're literally practicing racism, and it's noticeable. So that never got answered, of course. They just left that blank, and then they'll answer real simple questions on the whiteboard, and that's it. So I asked my doctor, I was telling my doctor, because I went in today, I'm telling her how that it's very strenuous on my muscles, and a guy hit the back of my car on the 6th of this month when I was on my way to work. So with that and picking that stuff like I'm, a robot, it's a lot on me. So she said that I had pulled a muscle, and she took me off from today till the 31st so I could get some rest. So that's the good part about it, because it's very stressful, especially when you're working like that. And the company as a whole, they're just really, they're crazy. And they really want you to work that fast in that department. And then they write you up so you can't transfer. Because I work an hour away. There's one here where I live, but because I got this write-up, because I'm not moving quick enough, or maybe I missed an item or whatever, just little small stuff that they don't train you for, of course. They just throw you in there. Because my write-up started the first week. It's like, you got to write up for what? Oh, well, you missed, you said an item was missing and we found it. How do I know you found it? Well, that's what we said. That kind of thing. So I'm glad to at least get a couple of weeks off from this wild environment. And that's what I wanted to share, and I will mute my line. And thank you for taking my call.
Invisible Man, Ralph Ellison, she said, working me like a robot. Invisible Man, Ralph Ellison. And to injury, I was thinking John Henryism the whole time, which is, the same thing. You're not even a human anymore. You're just some sort of machine to shove these packages in the cubbies as fast as you can until you kill yourself or pass out and die or whatever. All for Amazon. We got to get our goodies, man. We just got through Prime. It's Amazon or bust. Like, that's just atrocious. The whiteboard, I'm not surprised about with the question. I would think of some great questions to ask if they're going to have that whiteboard. I would definitely think of great questions to ask. I'm super glad that you got time off from work, because that's what I was thinking. It sounds like in addition to getting a better job, hopefully soon, this is another one that sounds like you don't want to be here long term unless you're going to be getting a promotion like quick. But I'm so glad to hear that you got some time off to rest and recuperate. That is Black self-care, how they erode Black mental health and just Black health, period. And having us stressed and accused and dealing with everything, all of the terrorism that people have talked about already on the program today. That, in fact, I'm transitioning, but not really. Just take exactly what we just heard from our mom in the Bay Area. Had to get time off, no work until the 30th. I think she said about to kill herself, working for Amazon. We love Amazon. We had a caller who wrote in, since we've been live on the air. They wrote in. I had to write in and report that a Black female at my job in another department was being mistreated by other white employees. Granted, I rarely came into contact with her, but today I saw her carrying a heavy box to the file room where she collapsed. She was having a heart attack. Once the paramedics came and stabilized her, a few minutes later, she started having a stroke. After they took her out of the building, the first thing my white female boss, who is indeed racist, along with my Black supervisor, started to do was to look for reasons to fire this lady. I concluded, although I rarely saw this lady, that what happened to her was due to terrorism. She was the only Black person in her department. Now, I said, I'm not really transitioning because it's the same thing. This is the system of racism, white supremacy. This is every day and just going and all the insults and terrorism and everything else and switching the schedule around in the last minute so you can't have a stable work hours for you and other people, family, quote unquote. This is exactly by design. And you see the total lack of compassion. We're not concerned. It's not flowers. It's not let's get a pool together so that we can take care of some of her medical bills and send her some chocolates and flowers. Is let's see if we can find a reason to fire that Negro. Yes, she spilled something on her way out. Yes, damaging company property. That'll do. That is the system of racism, white supremacy. Black self-care, super important. Thank you for writing in. Email again, untiljustice@gmail.com. Did other folks dialed in have a hand up, commentary to share, suggestions on what we've heard thus far or your own situation? While they lollygag, Mr. Steele, did you want to share, sir?
Oh, yeah. There was the question that victims ought to have in their arsenal of questions to ask on the job. One of my favorite ones is it all right if I ask questions? Or some variation of that. That usually causes the suspected racist or the person who is causing problems for you to pause, think, and then they're usually going to say, yes, it is okay for you to ask questions. And that gives you a time to go ahead, collect your thoughts, reframe the conversation, shift the conversation as needed, you can go ahead and use that time to, change the tone of the conversation as well. So that is a very good disarming question to go ahead and ask a suspected racist. Now, I went ahead and did this, and I did the question asking technique at one of my previous positions, and it did lead to a manager getting very, very, very upset with me eventually. This took a matter of a month, close to a year, for this manager to go ahead and have what they call a meltdown in reaction to my question asking. So yeah, it's definitely a technique that I've used in the past to great effect, and it's something that I think that victims should practice. Also, thanks to the previous caller who thanked, or you're welcome to the previous caller who said thank you earlier regarding some of my advice. I wish you luck at your new position, and keep in touch with that recruiter, because there may be other opportunities that that may come down the line from that recruiter. And if you have a good relationship with a recruiter as a technical professional, you'll never be in want for a job. They'll always have a few options for you to choose from. I'll go ahead and mute my line at this time. Thank you.
Much obliged, Mr. Steele. Great question. Is it all right to ask, or is it all right if I ask questions? Great question. I would definitely track if the answer is no. You are not allowed to ask questions. I would pull out my pad or make notation immediately anytime you get a no questions allowed. Other folks who dialed in, if you have commentary, suggestions for what's been discussed thus far, if you have your own situation, line should be open. Proceed.
Have you heard?
Greetings, caller in Florida. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Greetings to Gus, the host, the listeners and callers. I've been looking over the that diversity and inclusion plan PDF document again. But Gus, I think at the beginning you mentioned a question about, had we experienced, I guess, was it something about how whites deflect when you ask a question, or what was that again?
Well, now that did come up in the segment, different ways that white people deflect. I think I asked, is there a question that you think every victim of white supremacy should have in their counter-racist knapsack when they're on the job? One question that folks should ask. And then I also asked, has anyone gotten in trouble for asking questions? However, the audio segment that we started with, they did include ways that whites deflect from answering questions. And I did talk about that because I thought that was interesting. So if you have additions to that you've seen in the workplace, that would be acceptable as well.
Okay, because that reminded me of something where, this was back in January when they was trying to get me to do the pregnant female's job. She's had a baby at this point now, but at the time she was pregnant. So I had asked, I said, what was this all about this comment about I should be used? And this suspected racist, he deliberately starts talking about the filing area downstairs and how it's unkept. Totally ignored my question. and he tried to get it to the conversation to go on talking about how little pieces of paper should be picked up and put in the wastebasket, and we just try to make sure we be well and how we keep this place very tidy. And that was before he got upset about me pressing him pretty much about, am I being considered to do this additional task? And they are very skilled at how they're not going to answer certain questions. Because I mentioned how the warden didn't mention my name. So he asked a question. He says to my supervisor, was I at this meeting? And she says, I don't think you was. But I'm like, man, both of y'all was in there. So I have experienced that phenomenon. But I had some information that I had wanted to share from. Is dated it's titled Equal Opportunity Employment Plan, but it says from 2013 to 2015, and it says positions targeted for special recruitment. And they kept mentioning the terms women and minorities. And this is another PDF where it is saying it's two categories. I guess these are the top hierarchical levels, officials and professionals. And I keep seeing the term females and Asians. And then it's pattern females, officials, Asians, professionals, Asians, officials, females. So I'm thinking, who are they referring to? And then it gets to technicians and it says females, African Americans, Asians. And then protective services, females, African Americans, Asians, Hispanics. And then under environmental protection department, officials, Asians. So I'm thinking they're talking about white women or white females. And it was on one paperwork where it said that when it comes to underrepresented groups, you got to be in a 3.5% deficit to constitute as an underrepresented group. So they could easily be classifying white women into that category. At least that's how I'm perceiving it. But there were a couple of comments that was made on the job. There was the supervisor over in the juvenile area. Like when I was going to lunch, I was about to get on the elevator to go downstairs, and the sheriff, the bailiff, he had asked her. He was like, "Hey, well, where are you going? The day isn't over yet." And she says, "I just need to go to lunch because I need to get out of here before I hurt somebody." And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, there's no way I couldn't have said that in any context and not be confronted about that. So I don't know who she may have been talking about, but I wanted to start off with her because there is a black female who hasn't really gotten her 90-day probation or hasn't gotten off her probationary period. And apparently she was stuck in the office last Friday because she's working in the juvenile department. And the person that has been training her hasn't been training her very well, apparently. And I think he's been practicing racism as well. And she's been having issues with him to the point that when I go to lunch at 12 o'clock, she is coming out of the break room. So she already has it calculated to where she doesn't even want to have any contact with this person. Because I notice he comes in there to heat up stuff in the microwave at a little over 12. So she's obviously and justifiably so avoiding this person because he's reported her because they said that, hey, you have 30 days to get your act together. That's what I was told. So maybe that's some kind of a threat or whatnot. And the warden, she, I think, has also been trying to continuously be nice and trying to avoid me. Because there was a person that came there. I don't know if this was some kind of investigator person, but she was acting very nervous. And she avoided passing me in the hallway. So she said, well, this is where we do all of the records and stuff over here. So she says, well, let's go out this other way and go downstairs. But she didn't walk past the way I was standing at the copy machine. So I'm thinking there was something definitely was up about that. And there was another conversation where the female that sits in front of me, she just came up out of nowhere and was saying, hey, do you know that, her, the warden's assistant basically, does you know she has a mixed child? At least she just came out of nowhere and said this. And the supervisor, my black supervisor, was like, and so what? And, she was just saying how she can't take him to the barber shop and, they can't do certain things with his hair and things like that. And then they got into a conversation where they was talking about, yeah, I think it's very tough to where they, those kids grow up and they get treated badly on both sides. And I just said, hey, I just don't think that's accurate. There's no such thing as both sides. One side is responding to terrorism, and the other side is, which is the white side, is practicing a system of injustice. That's the language that I use, and she ended up agreeing with me. So I just said I want to use that term. And I know you don't. I know you mentioned not speaking about racism on the job. And one last thing, I was given a newspaper article on the Black Klansman. It was a white woman that worked in my department. She gave me this newspaper ad, and she wanted me to look at a Spike Lee interview. And I said, I'll have to catch it on YouTube or something. So apparently she's been researching this movie, and she's, I guess, going to see this. So I hadn't read this newspaper article, but it has her underlining in red ink certain parts of the article. So I found that very interesting. And that's the only thing I have right now, and thanks for allowing me to share.
Which parts of the article did she underline?
Let's see. It's one where it says, it starts out and it says, that speech based on tours, actual talks, is one of the script's key then, now parallels, and then in red, underlined, and it says, hearing tourists say we're being shot down in the streets like dogs by white racist cops. She has that underlined.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
And there's other parts.
Oh, let's hear one more.
Okay. And there's one at the end where it says, unite the right rally, and the presence of the real David Duke talking insistently about taking America back. This battle is not over. Lee is telling us not by a long shot.
Well, good old David Duke. How interesting. How interesting. Gave you a little recon for the job. I'd save that one. Check that away. That's one, like White's bringing up that Spike Lee film. I would be totally, even if I'd seen it 20 times already, like, nope, I don't know anything about that. Haven't seen it. I have to check, get some information on it. I don't know anything about that. And then, did you see it? What did you think about it? What do you can go back to asking questions. That's where we started at. That would be a great one. If they're going to open up with that, you could ask all kinds of questions on that one. Let's see. The white man avoiding answering questions about how you're going to be used on the job. Classic. Really be mindful of that in workplace environment. Like I said, they got a variety of reasons. I think I said that at the beginning. I'm sure that we did not get, even some of the juiciest 5 ways that whites avoid asking questions on the job, because they got a bevy of ways that they get around that. But just really be mindful of that and using correct language on the job. Um, let's see, or just using correct language and then making sure they ask you a question and redirecting them if they do not. Let's see. Great job. If you are going to bring up, I think Mr. Williams has talked about that. I think I've heard Mr. Fuller say that. You don't have to use the term racism on the job at all. You can just talk about justice and injustice, and it'll have the same impact. And racists will understand you because, they know they are the principal thugs that are in the way of justice is them. So same difference, but that is great. Just totally replace racism with justice and boop, go right away and say whatever you feel like you need to say on the job. That's grand that they even agreed with you about that. Let's see. Is anything else? I feel like there was one other situation. What was the situation with the warden this week?
Oh, okay. Well, today, still like the kindness, like I think as you said, the phoniness and the charade, but she's still like doing the thumbs up and then saying yes sir. The clerk is back there if you want a signature, but I wanted to add that because the day before yesterday there was a white man that came in there and he had on button-down slacks, and it couldn't have been an interview, and they were touring the whole building, but she wasn't introducing him to nobody. It was almost as though she was trying to avoid people interacting with him, but he looked like somebody of importance. I don't know if it was maybe somebody doing an investigation, but she was looking very nervous. And the black female, we talk about workplace racism, she said that she came by her department and she hurried him along into an area where there are no employees at desks, and she was trying to overhear a question he was asking her, like, why are you doing something? And it seems like you're trying to hurry me along, but she couldn't hear the woman's response. So she was trying to rush this person through the area, through the office. I don't know what it was about.
Well, great reminder, if anything. Number one, I think we talked before, racists, they can be kind when they want to. That doesn't mean that they've stopped practicing racism. Sometimes it just means they're calculating what the next move is going to be. And it sounds like she might just is still carrying out her little tacky charade, like we got a less confused Negra, and they might be doing some investigating about our shenanigans or misconduct here at the courthouse. So I'm going to watch my P's and Q's for a few days, and then we can get back to whatever, our deceitful behavior here is in the workplace. The other one I was going to get, I thought that was so important. The white person that went through and said, I got to get out of here before I smack someone. We just had, I think it was last week, someone called in and said a black person got fired for maybe joking, or something was taken out of context, them saying something to the effect of, I'll punch you in the face. And the white woman went into tears, and I'm a victim. I'm going to need, months of therapy and all of this. And they fired the black person, and we just can't have these sort of terroristic threats made in the workplace. Totally. Those sort of, and I would even write that sort of thing down. Like, there is no way I could not imagine me being, even with a smile, saying that I got to get out of here before I put my hands on somebody. Like, what? Like, are you serious? Like, come on. They would have dialed 911 in about 5 seconds, but I would point things like that out on this, especially if there's going to be any we got to have any sort of seminars, because sometimes they have workshops on violence in the workplace and what's appropriate. Like, come on now. We got people walking around here in any context talking about they need a break before they whack somebody upside the head. Like, come on. Like, I would make note that would definitely be in the workplace journal. Like, wow.
Hey Gus, could I add one last thing?
Yes, sir.
Just really quickly, the black female that I speak about these issues with, she mentioned, she made a very good point that there's a younger white female that has a lot of references that's been hired over the past 4 or 5 years, and they are stationed in every department. And then that really uh, interests me, is because she was correct about that. And then she said she thought the reason for that is for the recon and gathering information on people and bringing it back to the war, possibly. And there was a picture that I saved from years ago with this person when she was on the Facebook years ago, and she was at a club with some of her friends and a Confederate flag in the background.
That's probably some of the people that she hooked up with jobs at the courthouse. Like, that's keeping it real, as they say. That is the system of racism. But that sounds like what whites do. Well, that sounds like what racists do, one and the same, all the time. I'm hooking up my buddies, and it's win-win. I get to hook up all my buddies and get them jobs, white welfare, as Dr. Cambine calls it, and then recon, exactly as they said. They'll, be beholden to me, or we're buddies anyway. That's what we do all the time anyway. They can spy on all the people that work here, and I'll be hooked up with information from all the other departments. I'll have little minions that'll, do my bidding throughout the whole courthouse. This is not, like we're working at Wendy's or what have you. I can just get a hookup on Frosties. We're at the courthouse, for God's sake. So I'm sure whites are doing that all over, but that's fantastic, just to get a report that, yes, this is, what seems to be the pattern. She's got her little crew, entourage, working in the building and practicing racism, Confederate flag and the whole nine. This is Florida, so yeah, system of white supremacy. Much of it, get our PhD in white supremacy at the Florida courthouse. Other folks that we've not heard from at all, if you have your own situation, or if you have commentary on what's been shared, proceed. Let's see, did we nab all of the folks who had a hand up? Did we miss anyone? Greetings, Ivy.
Greetings, Gus, and greetings to all the callers on the line. Just want to pull up my notes real quick. Okay, I have them. Oh man, for the woman who had the heart attack and stroke, like that is just, man, I don't even have words. I hope that she, recovers very well, and I just hope that everything gets resolved with all of these. I don't want to use it. There's no pun intended here, but I can't think of another word. All of these attacks that she is enduring. I mean, that's just terrible. And for our mom in the Bay Area, I hope that you. I wish you the best as well with your health. I hope that you, recover very well and that you get another job soon. It just seems like you can't catch a break with just these crazy jobs with all of this, just extreme terrorism and madness and drama and just nonsense and just garbage just going on at these the job that you have now and the one that you just left. For a competent software developer, I wish you the best as far as the offer that you got and the promising conversation that you had. I hope that you get out of the place that you are now with all the mistreatment that you've endured from all the jealousy that they have. Dr. Mania, I wish you the best as well. I'm sorry that you're having to go through all this stuff that you're going through. You were even having some issues before you moved to New York. I mean, it's just how these Klan members, how they do us is it's so terrible. For the caller in Florida, like the language that you use in terms of practicing injustice rather than racism, I just think that was absolutely brilliant. And I think it's very, very helpful for all of us to codify the way that we talk about racism if we're going to do that, and it can just help us instead of avoiding it and just being able to help others. So that was just great, as always. I actually wanted to mention about the recording last week, where I said that I think that the woman, I believe her name was Catherine, I don't remember for sure, that she may have been deceived into the research that she did about telling your personal business and your personal life and so-called opening up to these terrorists. I went back and listened to the full audio, and I realized that what was happening is that they were defending racism, because usually if you are competent in your job and you are turned down for a promotion, that's a lawsuit. Like on site, that's a lawsuit. Even white people have sued for that under so-called discrimination because they were competent for a job and a black person didn't give them the job. But now what they're doing is that they're saying, oh, it's so-called minorities' fault because they're not opening up and things of that nature. And when you have a black person saying, yeah, go ahead and open up and find somebody that you trust and open up to them, it appears to legitimize them practicing racism, because what she should have said was, if you're competent for a job and you're not getting it, and you're not getting your promotion and things of that nature, you need to file a lawsuit. But she didn't say that. She said comply and do what they said. So that's another reason why I think she was deceived and misled into that research, because that is unjust denial of promotion. And I think also they were probably doing damage control to stop lawsuits from, where people are filing lawsuits for being competent and still being turned down, and also to justify when the judges, they reject these lawsuits, because I'm sure that happens as well, where they just find some way to just, deny them when people are competent and still are not getting the job, and they're saying, hey, racism is being practiced and that's the reason this is happening. And the last thing I just wanted to say quickly was, Gus, I wish you the best as far as your yoga teacher training. Props to you for just, enduring all this time from all of the mistreatment that you have endured, because, the invaders have taken over yoga and they don't, appreciate a non-white person trying to be an instructor, and especially a male at that, a non-white male on top of that. So I just, really wish you the best, and I'll mute my line. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Gus.
Much obliged. Much obliged. Hopefully we will get through the last 2 days safely as possible, and certification in hand, move forward. Other folks who dialed in, if you have commentary, folks that we've missed completely, line should be open. Proceed.
May I be heard?
Greetings, Red in Nevada.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking my call. A couple of things, actually. Something have recently happened at the plantation, at my current plantation, and it kind of goes against definitely goes against the segment played last week about opening up to people, kind of being more friendly, because then you kind of get deceived, or a victim can kind of get deceived into thinking they can joke around with a suspected racist. And that it actually happened at the plantation. A victim had joked around, I guess, with a white person, and a white person felt like it wasn't a joke, and the end result was the victim being fired. So the victim didn't take it well, and we all had like a little meeting about that. But it definitely goes against the whole, you can open up to people, or maybe opening up isn't quite joking around, but kind of when I think of opening up, you're telling people, personal stories, stuff like that, and maybe some jokes are involved. So that happened, and actually, I know I've been speaking a lot recently about just the constant moving of where I currently work, like the workstation that I'm assigned to. And currently the workstation that I'm assigned to, I'm by this very, very nice victim. And the victim, female, she has a lot of stuff at the workstation that she's assigned to, like candy and all types of stuff like that. And it's been referenced on the cows, how you really shouldn't have that. People, that just kind of opens up for tacky racist jokes or little comments. And of course, I heard one today. It was actually either today or yesterday. A suspected racist came over to the desk, because now it's kind of like a thing that a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot, but at least a handful of people know that this victim has stuff at the workstations that she's assigned to. So the racist came over and wanted to get some chocolate. And the racist that came over several times to the workstation that she's assigned to get some candy. And the racist says, you know what, here I'm over here again, you're like my drug dealer. So I'm like, a great example of why you should not have, stuff at your desk, even if, you're really nice. It's, being at work, it's not the time to, really be nice, at least from my opinion. There was one other thing. Oh, yes. We have to do periodic, like rereading like different regulations and policies, stuff like that. And so what I learned was that a new kind of component of, I guess, like workplace harassment, which is isolation. So and I guess the example, it would be kind of like a group of people not wanting to speak to another person. And that would be grounds enough to basically be considered harassment. And I thought that was really interesting. So it almost, I feel like these different policies, I don't think that they're fully explained, because at the end of the day, I feel like, if you have a group of people who maybe this one person is mistreating them, and if they don't want to, communicate or have any dealings with the person, then isolation should be, acceptable. So I just thought that was really interesting. That's all I have to share at this time. I'll mute my line. Thank you for allowing me to share.
Much obliged. See, even in those type of interactions, I think I said a week ago, Friday, back to yoga, we had to do our karma project. We had to volunteer at a women's shelter in downtown Seattle for like 3-4 hours. And I said that the first part of the morning we were sorting food donations, and we got, it was one box, it was just all this candy. And I was like, oh, look at those gummy bears there. These are like really expensive Seattle gummy bears. Like, oh my God, they're really expensive, but these are so good. And the white woman that I was there, suspected race soldier that I was there in the training with, she says, oh, check his pockets before he leaves. Criminal. Just over gummy bears. Not, oh, wow, those are tasty. I've had them before. Oh, really? I'm not a fan of confectionaries. Anything but you're a criminal. Same illustration that she just gave. Not thank you so much for hooking me up with all this chocolate, or you could even make your little joke like you're totally ruining my summer waistline, and if I don't get to fit in my bikini, it'll be you to blame. No. You're my pusher. You are a crack dealer. That's all that I think of you niggers. All of you. Like, you're just here to sell my, like, just the way racist man, racist woman are always, that's even almost like a racist joke, really, in my opinion, that you're just some sort of street peddler here for hooking me up with candy. But I've said that consistently for a long time about not having trinkets at your desk. Not a good sign. And I've heard too many stories over the years from victims of racism who were just trying to be nice, trying to be friendly on the job, welcoming. I'm a pal to all. Come by and get a snack by my desk and have a quick word. And it ends up being something like that. I've had people where they made, where the whites came up and made a sexual comment along with getting their candy, or they stole the candy out. I mean, just the materials that you need to complete your job. I think that was read. In fact, I had just mentioned, because we had the caller who said that joking, it was the caller in Florida who said that the white woman on the job said that she had to get out of here before she punches someone, before I put my hands on someone, before I punch someone. I think that might have been Red, who said that the black female got fired on the job because she allegedly said, I'm going to punch you in the face, or if you do that again, I'll punch you in the face. And the white woman took it seriously, even though it seems this may have been a joke. Was that the situation you were referencing, Red?
Yes, that was it.
Got it. Yeah, that just happened last week, where we were saying not to joke around on the job, and conversely, that whites, that they can make all of these type of outlandish statements and no big deal. Moving on, having another cup of coffee. Other folks that we've not heard from at all, if you have suggestions on what's been shared, or if you have your own situation, line should be open. I still feel like I didn't hear too many questions. That might mean that a lot of people do not have questions prepared that they ask on the job. I've also said for years that we should all be asking about the sexual harassment policy. What is your policy for dealing with any sort of unwanted? All of us, that should be at least one question that we ask on a job situation. Are there other folks that we've not heard from at all? Don't know if we have spectators or if folks are lollygagging, just making sure we did not miss any hands. I'll assume we nabbed everybody. Did we miss any of the folks who had additional comments, questions that stood out?
Hey, Gus. This is Draftmania. I wanted to talk to the question about when you asked the question about has just you ever had the race soldier get upset when you ask questions on the job? Well, I have an experience with that. When I was working at my previous job, it was surrounded around training. Again, I was thrown into an assignment without the proper training. And I had got wind of why the other, and I wasn't codified at the time, why the other employee quit the position. It was because she didn't get training and she was being harassed by the supervisor, who was a tyrant and a race soldier. So I had the manager, my manager, he was basically like, oh my God, he was really like reprimanding me and making me like feel, he was belittling me and making me feel stupid because I didn't know what I was doing, and giving me all this lecture. And I was like kind of feeling, I was starting to feel really bad about myself. So I simply asked him, I said, well, I wasn't trained on this. And then he tried to say I was trained on it. And then I said, well, didn't the other individual that worked here, she wasn't, isn't that the reason why she quit? And when I said that to him, he said, he got so upset with me. He was like, oh, well, I can't answer that. You're going to have to take that up with HR or whatever. I'm going to need to speak to, I'm going to need another party here, HR or somebody here, in order for me to answer that question. He just got really indignant and upset because I did ask him the question, because I knew that there was a history of them not training for that position and to do that job. And then we had the director. She was, or no, I think she was a CEO or no, a VP of the department, and she was like a race soldier. And she was like a suspected race soldier, and she was a tyrant. And she would get on. She would get on everybody, and like she would talk to you like you were less than, she just would really talk to you like you were less than and make you feel really bad about yourself. So when I asked him that question, we had to end up having a meeting with the VP, and everything turned out fine, but it was just like, I don't know, he got really mad when I asked him that question. Like, he wanted to take it up with he basically he told the VP, and it escalated, and it was really like, wow. And I'll mute my line.
Much obliged, Draptomania. That's why I said I thought that should have been included. And that training thing, it comes up all the time. Black people not being trained. That's, pretty much bedrock aspect of racism, white supremacy, to make sure that we do not adequately train black people. Then we'll have a ready-made for anything, any way that we want to move things along in the workplace. If we want to keep them here and not promote them, oh, you're not performing up to standard. If we want to fire them, oh, you're not performing up to standard. We don't want to give them a raise. Oh, you're not. We got it because we've set you up to not be successful to begin with. That's what I asked in my yoga to teacher training. But that's why I said that should have been included in the segment, because I feel like I've heard from enough black people that it seems like from time to time we do run into problems for asking questions, more so than a white person would, I suspect. Other folks have comments, suggestions that they wanted to get in.
Can I be heard?
Codified software developer.
Yes, sir. So this, in relation to asking questions, this actually did not happen on my job. It actually happened at my son's job at school. So every school year, we have to meet with the teacher, his advisor at this point, because he's in middle school. And last night, I met with his advisor for this year. And there was another parent there, another black female, who was also waiting for him, and I didn't realize she was waiting for him, and we worked it out, and we both sat there together while he spoke to us. And so we were going over the handbook and the policies and everything for this year, and he mentioned that this year students get Chromebooks to take home, that they're assigned a Chromebook, and that they will be taking them home. And, of course, I was a little concerned about this because I ask questions, since I'm in IT, I ask questions like, how do you know that the student who is supposed to be using the Chromebook is actually using the Chromebook? Is there some sort of two-factor authentication? There's some sort of single sign-on, some way, some sort of VPN, some way that this child, that you know that this is the child that is on this Chromebook, because I want to avoid problems later on. And he was not getting upset. This is a white male, suspected racist. He was not getting upset, but the black female, the other parent, really started to get very agitated. And it sort of reminded me of that phenomenon. I guess it's not really a phenomenon. It can be explained, where we're just conditioned to automatically defend a white person when another non-white person is challenging the things that they're saying. She began to get very angry and very defensive for this white male. And I was just courteous and kept asking my questions, which would benefit her as well. So that's my story about that. I have not had issues at work with asking questions. I think one time I asked a question. I said, "Well, excuse me, I'd like to ask. I need clarification on something." And one of the white males said, "Oh God," and I just went on ahead and asked my question. But that's all I have. I'll mute my line.
Love it. Love it. Love it. People are disgusted with the questions in the workplace. Stay courteous and continue with your question. Woo. Context of White Supremacy. The number again, 641-715-3640. The code 564943 #. Press *61 if you would like to participate. That strategy will work in a lot of situations, staying courteous, and you just continue with your question. Same strategy with the school situation, with a victim no less. Stay courteous, especially courteous with a victim, and you continue with your question. And I do not know, I'm not aware of a term that anyone has coined for that, although I've certainly experienced it myself. I've witnessed it where a victim of racism felt the need to become aggressive or verbally attack a non-white person who was questioning a white person with suspicion. Like, I've endured that many times. That is unfortunate. That's, a part of our brain trashing, but you stay courteous and you stay codified as you ask your questions of the white person. Other folks who have comments, suggestions, if we have any other questions that folks would recommend, hey, black person, you should definitely make sure you ask this question on your job. That was something we asked at the top of the broadcast.
Good evening. Can I be heard?
Can I be heard?
I heard retired firefighter and the aforementioned princess. We'll nab princess and then we'll get retired firefighter.
He can go first.
Thank you. I was just going to state with the behavior that I think the last caller was mentioning about the non-white person acting in pro bono attorney for a white person. I would recommend and suggest that that's actually is unfortunately common behavior. If one of the results of the system of racism, white supremacy. I also have experienced it myself in many different circumstances on the job. One in particular that comes to my mind was, Charles Phillips was actually involved in it at the station that I think I've mentioned on the program, where myself, Mr. Clark, and several other non-white black males who also was active on the behalf of attempting to solve the problem, or at least make it known to non-white people off duty. We actually did it all together at a fire station on a shift. And so it was a continuous, it wasn't unusual for the administration would come to the station, basically to hold meetings with us at the station. And on this one particular occasion, as I mentioned, at that time he was with the administrative staff, Charles Phillips, but he wasn't the director yet. But they did send him, and not speaking about Charles, but it was another non-white black person who was representing, he was actually representing the union, non-white black male that I knew. Unfortunately, he was in a sexual relationship with a white female that produced several children. And I basically was speaking on the behalf of myself and two other non-white black males about the activities that that the fire department actually, in my opinion, purposely sent this racist white person to be in the lieutenant's position. And every shift, we were getting into problems with this person, and it came down to having this quote unquote big meeting. And he would mention about some sort of incident, and I would come up with something else to oppose what he was saying. And that went on for about 20 or 30 minutes. And the black male, basically spoke on his behalf, not so much directly, but indirectly, basically telling me to, I'm trying to think of the metaphor, hold up or something like that, ease up, something like that, he basically was saying. And I basically, as polite as I possibly could, mentioned to him that first I asked the question, what are you here for? Which I didn't understand on why he was at the meeting. And, dealt with that issue for a brief time and then went back to what I was doing. Eventually it worked out. Everything worked out. But that's a normal behavior, unfortunately, that we have, because in our confusion, a lot of us are so thankful that we're employed, and we suspect that it's primarily because white people allow us to be employed, which has some truth to it, but kind of like in the wrong context. If from my analysis of it, and just wanted to mention that's common. I would say, based on what I've been hearing so far, is to continue to, when you're not at your job, just come up with some plans, some ideas that can basically assist you when you're at work on making your day as constructive and healthy as possible. Never take it for granted. And as far as questions, I heard questions on how important that is. It is very important. I think it should be no limit to the amount of questions that you should be asking. And just like what it suggests is in Mr. Fuller's book, where he has hundreds of questions, I think that's something that we all can do also, is to, take some time when you're not working and just write some questions down on what you think would be constructive to ask your employer, on the job, on a daily basis. And, and of course, record, meaning write down what the answers are, so you'll have a record of that, as far as that concerned. So if the instance comes up again, that you already be prepared for what to say and what to do. And that's what I have so far. Thank you.
Preparation. I think that was mentioned in the audio segment from the Harvard Business Review that we started the segment off with. Preparation. That should be a central aspect of counter-racist codification, being prepared. That way we are not surprised when we experience white terrorism. Stacy in the UK, was that you jingling?
Hi guys, hello to you and the rest of the callers. Sorry, was I actually the next person? Because I was conscious. I think somebody else was. I the next person?
It's very early Friday morning, 3:34 a.m. I think we can all allow you to speak next.
Thank you very much. That's so ironic that you said that, because one of my updates was about my beads, actually, which is actually what you just heard. I mentioned I have my hair in Bo Derek style, and I hadn't actually observed up until this week that not one white person had commented on my hair since I went back to work. And not because I particularly want the white identification, but it's just the tackiness exists. And I thought, this is really interesting, because for me, I pay attention as much to what people don't say sometimes as much as what they do say. And I think, it's worth noting that, not necessarily to do with my hairdo, but in general, when you're not asked things that you expect. So that's, I guess, one tip for people. But anyway, I walked into a lift early on in the week, and I saw a white female, suspected racist, that I don't see very often because she's on a different floor. And I guess it was the first time I'd seen her in a while. And she says, "Oh, I bet your hair makes noise when you swing it from side to side." And she paused for a bit and looked at me as if she was waiting for me to start then swinging my hair around in the lift. And I was quite shocked, and my reaction was, but not laughing, but actually just stunned. And and then I thought, quickly get back on code. So I said, "No, I don't do that." She said, "Oh." And then I got to my floor, so I was walking out, and as I was walking out, because there was another white female in the lift, she turned and she said, "I love the sound of maracas." Oh God, okay, let me just continue out this lift and not say anything. So yes, tackiness, but yes, that was me making a sound. In terms of questions, apologies because I didn't hear most of the broadcast, but in terms of questions, if I'm picking up correctly, you asked people if asking questions helped for them or not. I would advise people to ask questions. However, questions do get you into trouble. Even when you're being encouraged to ask questions. I remember once when we had the new chief exec start and his team, the director, racist, aggressive director of my unit, asked people to give feedback on, any interactions that we may have had with the new team. She used to have these weekly cascades where the whole unit would be asked to gather around her desk. She'd give us an update on anything she knew, and then people could get a chance to ask any questions. And I asked a question, which wasn't, to this day, I don't think there was anything contentious about the question, but obviously I was persona non grata. I'm not allowed to speak, and I hadn't picked up that things were that bad that I couldn't even ask a question, even though everybody was being invited to ask questions, and I needed the answer to the question. It wasn't just a question for the sake of being noticed. She then sort of half responded back to me. She couldn't even make eye contact, and said, well, I've asked my team to feed back to their teams in team meetings, and sort of, then in a sort of way of brushing me off, but also in a sort of contempt for my mere presence. And that was probably the last question that had been asked, and she was finished with her cascade. And we were then walking back towards where team sits. My manager stormed off. Sorry, the head of team stormed off the back of my question as if she was angry. And then my line manager also then hurried after like a sycophant. And something must have been said, because my line manager turned back and walked back towards me and said, "Oh, we'll pick these kind of questions up in the team meeting." So I realised that I'd done something wrong. I think it was just that I existed, because there was nothing outrageous about the question. And also we were being invited to ask. So, yeah, I mean, questions can get you into trouble. I mean, to be honest, I didn't care that she was upset. I didn't care that the director didn't like the question, even though there was nothing wrong with the question. But what I did do is let me know, yes, things are that bad. And I did obviously sort of raise that as one of the examples when I did my grievance for the level of contempt was shown. So, yeah. But in terms of questions for people to ask, I mean, I'll give this some more thought. But one thing, probably quite important, is, are you happy with me to proceed? And that is on the basis of any decisions or any projects or anything that you might be working on. Make sure you get it in writing, set out what you're planning to do, and then, are you happy with me to proceed? And that's useful because people's memories can, conveniently fail them at times. And I guess one more act of racism that I did note over the last couple of weeks. We're working on a number of projects, and some of it involves engaging with public to get their opinions, give them opportunities to ask questions on what we're doing. And there was a consultant that I met with my manager. Now, this was off the back of an event that happened before I went back to work. And we met with this consultant about some ongoing work related to the sort of wider project that we're working on. And I sat down and they were discussing something, and I was just thinking. I wasn't even saying anything. I was listening to what was being said because partly I was getting up to speed, and I wasn't there for I wasn't there at the event, so I'm just listening to that conversation. And the consultant was giving her feedback on certain things, and this is a suspected racist. And then all of a sudden she stopped and she said, "Oh, I've got a really stern look on my face, or I'm looking very serious." And I said, "No, I'm just thinking and listening," and let her carry on. And she seemed to be nicely dressed, but she came across as, I guess, the equivalent of what you would call in the US is to be trailer trash. But she wasn't, I don't think she's quite sort of, I wouldn't say she's lives in a trailer park, but somebody who's made it out of the trailer trash. That's what she trailer park. That's how it came across to me. But anyway, she's a consultant, and then she carried on, really gossipy type, and I didn't think she was particularly professional. But hey, anyway, so once that meeting had finished, we were back on the floor where my team is located. My manager came up to me at the end of that meeting and sort of had a brief conversation about it. And, she asked me what I thought of this particular person. So, I'm careful. I kind of stay on code. I said, "Oh, she seems fine. It seems like they've got a lot of work on them, and, whether or not they could actually pick up what we're being asked to do." I said, "She seems very energetic," or whatever, which really was my coach is saying, "Really?" Now she said, "Oh, yeah, she actually did at this public event upset somebody." Now, I suspect because of the nature of the project that we're working on, this would have been a non-white person, but effectively the person was asking questions. So this is a member of the public being invited to come to an event where they ask questions. She was getting upset because she was, and the excuse was made that she hadn't been briefed properly, upset the person by her reaction, and the person walked out of the event. And this has been relayed back to me. If it's a really cute story, and they're still proposing to give her more work. And I thought, this is really interesting, because I don't think any non-white consultants, if they ever was such a thing, because I've never seen a non-white consultant in the place, would never get away with that. So, I just put that down to pure racism. And in terms of my progress on code, my weekly progress, And I do find it useful to relay my progress back for myself, because that means I have to keep on track and remain codified. I'm still hovering at 80%. I'll mute my line there, Gus, because I'm conscious I was speaking quite a while.
Stacy in the UK, Friday morning, very early Friday morning in the UK, sharing her views. That is a great recommendation for a question, because I have seen that as well, where whites get amnesia. That has come up in the yoga training, where they get amnesia about what's been asked, expectations. Did you approve this project or us proceeding in this manner? And even getting that in writing can be helpful at times, because I've seen the convenient amnesia that is consistently to the black person's detriment. I've seen rash cases of that in the workplace and beyond. The hair thing, I've seen that in the workplace, where just we talked about that before, where that anything with the hair can be an excuse for tackiness, either by omission, where they conspicuously have nothing to say, or then they just come out and flat out expect you to break into gyrations and the whole nine with the hair aspect on the job. Remaining codified with other victims. I think that's something that we've come up with a lot too, in making sure whatever code we have on the job, making sure that a aspect of it that we have covered, how we're going to deal with other confused victims, because that is going to be integral anywhere in the world, to have that already thought out, prepared for in advance. Princess, much obliged for your patience. Did you have commentary, ma'am?
Yes, good evening. And I just wanted to share a somewhat bit of good news, although, you can take it however you want. I had just learned the other day when I had came into work, the district manager over our region, he came to visit our location and was speaking with the store manager. And as I had just clocked in and got into the office and was getting ready to do my paperwork and get ready for my shift for the evening, he started up a conversation with me. I was already upset about an incident that had happened over the weekend with the assistant store manager, who is a non-white, non-black East Indian male. And basically, he was just giving me a litmus test on, my stats as far as sales and stuff. And I guess he was surprised that I knew, all of my stuff. So finally, he came out the bag and basically had announced that as of the 5th of September, he will no longer be over our district. They're shipping him out. So I said it's kind of bittersweet because, like I said, I have this thing I'm trying to prepare with the EEOC. I've already contacted corporate about a lot of the stuff that went down, especially the incident with my car and this former employee and other people that they allowed to walk. And so I think things are in motion per se, but, with white people, they don't necessarily get fired outright like we do. He's being transferred and put in another position. But when he made the announcement to me, he had turned to me and he was basically made the comment stating that I bet I'm glad that I no longer have to see his face anymore. And the store manager kind of looked my way and I'm looking at him. I didn't say anything because I actually, thinking back, I was going to respond by saying, well, you shouldn't talk about yourself that way. But I just, just trying to keep conflict because I had already had an issue with the assistant store manager about another employee who turns out to be this DM's mother-in-law. And I've known about it for a long time. I've just kept it hush-hush, but she did something that I just said, you know what, I'm tired of playing these games with you guys. And so I pretty much put it out there to the assistant store manager, what the deal was with that. Whether that had anything to do with it and it got back to corporate, I can't say. But it was part of the paperwork that I did include to the EEOC about, the situation between him and her. And we did have an incident, like I said, over the weekend last weekend where I was scheduled to open the store, but I refused to open the store because the assistant store manager, since I've been at that store, he's never been able to make a schedule correctly. It's always been damage control. We've had meetings about this. It's been an ongoing issue and stuff like that. And the week before that, we had an incident where someone was a no-call, no-show and left the manager on duty alone at the store upon opening. And within 10 minutes, we got robbed. So, in hindsight of that following weekend when it was my turn to open, I basically gave them an ultimatum. Either you get someone there or, I'll be there, but I will not open the store because I quoted policy. You're supposed to have two people, somebody running the front end of the store as well as a manager and two people closing. So basically I spent an hour going back and forth with my store manager, and he was pretty much assuring me somebody was going to be there. I knew he wasn't going to be there. So apparently he must have had some words with the assistant store manager, and he wound up having to come in to open the store, even though he had to come back a few hours later to wind up doing his shift. So off the tail end of that, he was already upset with that. And, but just, just tacky behavior, just continuing. But I've been keeping my documentation. I would say, as far as dealing with the overall investigation, I've just made sure that even though people say that they're willing to help or bear witness to anything, I don't necessarily go out of my way and sharing certain details about what I've included in the report, or even when I sent off certain things, I've just been kind of keeping an eye on, things that have been changing throughout the district. And I know my former manager, when I got transferred from New Orleans, he wound up getting fired a few months back. So that was a sign right there. So, I'm just waiting to see what happens. So.
Much obliged. Princess, great job using policy and procedure. Talked about that earlier in the program. To really be a stickler, as they say, about policy and procedure. If what your handbook says is that two employees are supposed to be here to open the store, then that's what we should be adhering to. Unless there's been an update to policy and procedure. Has there been? Question. Oh, okay. It's supposed to be two. Well, then there should be two people here to open the store. And even an hour. Are we spending an hour to get me to violate policy and procedure? Another question. But great job sticking to policy. That's, I encourage that on a regular basis. Know the policy and procedure forwards, backwards, know it as well, or as that's the goal, to know it as well as the race soldiers on your job. And anytime, I think a lot of times it happens on the job and in other situations where whites will try to bait us. Anytime, it can be other non-white people too, but especially whites, where they come into, oh man, I know you're going to be tired of seeing my face. And oh man, that sort of thing. I would not stoop to their level at all. Even if it's a non-white person and they make a comment like that in a workplace setting, I would not return with anything other than it would be super courteous. If I couldn't be super courteous and polite and, I wish you the best and, tremendous success in your new endeavor. Hopefully you'll get lots of raises and it'll be great. If you can't say something constructive and courteous, it wouldn't be anything at all. But I certainly, even if I couldn't stand the person, I would not take that big because that sort of thing, they could use that to say, "Oh man, I didn't think that was constructive at all. You were really rude when Susan was leaving at her goodbye party, and I just didn't think that was in good team spirit and spirit of camaraderie when it's time for you to get a raise or promotion or what have you. I wouldn't stoop to that bait at all." Last few moments. Did anybody else have final question, suggestion they wanted to make sure they share before we get ready to wrap things up?
May I be heard?
Have you heard?
I heard Ivy and Red in Nevada. Let's see. We'll do Ivy first.
Rick, go first. Rick. Aw, I wasn't ready to go, but okay. I just wanted to quickly say that, what the codified software developer shared about, I believe, someone on staff or something like that with her son at his school. There's a myriad of reasons that she could have done that, and even just you, Gus, and probably Mr. Fuller, and even the codified software developer have taught me about Stockholm syndrome. So that could be one reason. But the first thing that always comes to mind for me is his fear, and that Black people know what happens when white people get upset, and they can obviously get real upset when they're being challenged. So probably more than anything, it was fear, and she was trying to do damage control and maybe try to maybe help herself in terms of keeping her job or something like that. I wanted to say also to Princess, it seems like over the years she's just shown a tremendous amount of competence, like what you were saying, Gus, in terms of her knowing her policy and procedure, because she's had a lot of problems on the job, and she, has been transferred maybe even more than once. And I think that, just the things that she has shared over the years of the questions that she's asked, the ways that she has responded, the times when she brought up policy and procedure and things of that nature. And I think she's even in a supervisory position, that if she had not been codified in those ways, I think that she would have been fired, especially by her being Black, or at least I think she's Black. And I want to say also real quick to the codified software developer that was just amazing Black self-respect to continue to be courteous to the victim and not be and not tear her down for being more confused. And you've always shown that you are very serious about that, about trying not to just to minimize conflict with confused people and with other victims, to not be so quick to report them or talk bad about them or anything like that. You just always seem like you handle them in a codified manner, and that's all I had. And thanks, Red, and thanks, Gus. I'll mute my line.
Much obliged, Ivy. Red in Nevada.
Thank you for allowing me to share again. I'll try to make it quick. I know recently, and I forgot to add this, I had asked a question about an incomplete policy, and the white people, basically in charge, they said, well, you're thinking too much about it. So maybe just leaving that as maybe something that victims can think about, how would they respond, because I didn't really respond. I just basically said okay and just kind of had to figure out something on my own. But then I also decided to make kind of like a suggestion for myself that I forwarded on to my manager on maybe how to complete the process. And that's all I'll leave it there. Thank you for allowing me to share again.
Indeed. Context of white supremacy policy and procedure. You're thinking about it too much. That's fascinating in and of itself. if folks have a thought on that, or if any other questions or thoughts came to mind, if you have a question that you would recommend, that was one of the questions that I asked. Questions that we think, all Black people victims of racism should ask. If you hear the archives and you have a question you want to submit, you can email untiljustice@gmail.com, and we'll share your question as we proceed. But with that, we will call it a broadcast. We'll be here Saturday for the compensatory call-in, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Barracoon, we will not have the book club tomorrow because our my normal teacher training classes are 3 hours. Tomorrow's session is 5 hours for us to conduct our written, oral, and teaching exams. So that'll be a big chunk of my day. Who knows how things could go? I've challenged the lead white woman suspected race soldier who is conducting our teacher training and reporting she and all of the instructors for the disorderly and unprofessional way that the training has been conducted. That is a word that I am a big advocate of, unprofessional, because then I'm not complaining, my feelings are not hurt, I'm not sad, this is being conducted in an unprofessional manner, and then I cite specific evidence as to the unprofessionalism. Big advocate of using that word. I try to employ it as regularly as I can. It generally has been effective. At any rate, I'll report back on how that goes if they decide to be vindictive. Horrible timing. This is one of those situations where Gus had the option of not saying anything. I could have been quiet, shut my mouth, took the exam tomorrow, likely passed, and none of this would have happened. I did not take that option. I took the option of reporting this to more powerful white people because I was thoroughly disgusted. I really have a problem with people wasting my time under any circumstances, and the flagrant contradictions when you ask people questions about what needs to be done and they answer it directly. You don't have to, pin them down. They don't hem and haw. They give you a direct answer, and then they contradict that a week or so later, and that to happen repeatedly, it just frustrated me to the point where I had to say something. I was unwilling to continue to endure that quietly, even if it meant a confrontation or tomorrow's exam being more difficult than it needed to be. I'll report back as to how all of that goes. We shall see. With that, much obliged to everyone for participating. I hope it was a constructive investment of your Thursday evening. Again, sobriety would be best under conditions of white terrorism. Dr. Welsing, Mr. Fuller, many of the folks that we esteem, they would strongly encourage. Let's take excellent care of our brain computer, manage our health as best we can under horrible circumstances. Let's leave all of white's narcotics and poisons alone. Our brain computers are needed to crank out new solutions, new concepts, to bring about a permanent solution to the problem, whites. In addition to being sober, even while we are out frolicking for the weekend, let's be buckled up each and every time we are in a vehicle, driver, or passenger. Let us do all we can to minimize contact with race soldiers, badge or no. That said, Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other Black people, victims of white supremacy. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of Black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another Black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. C.O.W.S signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. Problem. You're a victim. Man, I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.